This meeting is of the Margate Planning Board of March 30th, 2023 is called to order. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Tom Collins.
Here.
Richard Patterson.
Here.
Michael Cristaldi. Jim Galantino.
Here.
Margaret Gubernalti. Craig Palmisano. Stephen Giesecke.
Here.
Remy Pelosi.
Here.
Michael Ruffio. Andrew Campbell. Michael Richmond.
Here. This meeting is being held in accordance with due public notice thereof and pursuant to the New Jersey State Sunshine Law. Notice of this meeting was advertised in the press, and a copy of same has been posted on the bulletin board in the municipal building. All applicants are hereby advised that should you receive board approval tonight, you must come forward and sign a form, which informs you regarding the timing of receiving building permits and mercantile licenses. At the end of your case tonight, please see the board administrator to sign the two information sheets. Leah, would you swear in the acting planning board administrator?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I spoke to Palma ahead of time. The acting administrator wouldn't get sworn in, just an appointment.
Oh, well,
Palma's going to run this meeting. I think Carmela's here. Welcome, Carmela, just to observe and learn tonight. So we can appoint her now, or we can just wait till next meeting when she's actually
just appoint her.
Okay, and then we'll appoint you now, and welcome. Thanks for helping us, and then Palma's going to run this meeting, and then we'll ease you in next time, right? Is that your understanding?
Yes.
Okay. So
would you stand up so they understand why she's being appointed?
Oh.
Pardon me?
Yeah, so, all right, so we'll need someone to
Make a motion.
to appoint Carmela Malfara as our new or our temporary board administrator slash secretary, and then a second, and then we could just do it all in favor.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
And I could do a resolution for next time.
Okay.
Get it all official.
I'd like to hear a motion for the approval of the minutes for the meeting of February 23rd, 2023.
Make a motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. I'd like to hear a motion for approval of decisions and resolutions. Number 7, 2023, 15 South Mansfield, LLC. Number 8, 2023, Joseph Cherry Jr. Number 9, 2023, M&A Management Team, LLC. And number 10, 2023, SAJ Associates, LLC.
I'll make a motion.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. I have just one announcement. I've been on this board for 16 years and a CPA for 50 years, and I kind of feel it's my duty that since we're all personally profiting from our decisions, that you have to report it on your tax return. Okay? Yes. First case, or no, you need to be sworn in. Roger?
I can swear Roger now. Mr. McCarnan, please raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm the testimony you'll give throughout this evening will be the truth?
I do.
Great, thank you.
First case is Michael and Pamela Clark, 419 North Douglas Avenue, Block 604.03, Lot 5, located in the S40 zoning district, seeking C variance relief for setback and possibly others in order to install a gas fire pit in the rear yard. Taxes and water payments are current, and proof of advertising and notifying have been satisfied. Mr. McLarnon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, just for clarification, Palma will be out after tonight to celebrate the birth of her first child, so it's a good moment for everybody. So I wish Palma the best. So back to business. My report is based on the application of Michael and Pamela Clark, 419 North Douglas Avenue, Block 604.03, Lot 5, located in the S40 zoning district, located at FEMA Zone X. If they're building a new house, they have to abide by the next highest adjacent flood zone. The background is as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate in order to install a gas-fired outdoor fire pit in the rear yard that does not meet the ordinance requirements. The ordinance is written with the intent that all fire pits are wood-burning, and consideration shall be given to differentiate the type of fuel used in the form of an ordinance revision at some point if the city desires. So this is a substantial benefit variance. There is no hardship. Page 2 is the zoning chart for this property. Continue on page 3. Highlighted are the variances required, and I will also show the documents reviewed to generate this report. And the variances required are as follows. Fence height, whereas the maximum height of a fence without a pool or hot tub is 5 feet, and a newer 6 foot and a 7 foot small portion of white vinyl fence exists. Again, testimony will be provided to tell the board, inform the board how that came to action. We don't have any record of any permits for those fences. Fire pit height, whereas the maximum fire pit height is 2 feet and more than 2 feet is proposed. Fire pit size, whereas the maximum size of a fire pit is a 3 foot diameter, or which is an equivalent 7 square foot and 16 square feet is proposed. Again, it's one of those table models that's square, it's 4 by 4. And a fire pit setback, more importantly, whereas the minimum setback of a fire pit is 15 feet and less than 11 feet 1 inch is proposed. Again, I did discuss this application with my fire inspector, our fire inspector. He said the gas fire pit would conform to as they have presented. So I'm not going to go through all my comments, but again, clarification on the fences without permits. I believe that the applicant bought the house with the fence, higher fence already there, and they just replaced it, not knowing they needed a permit. Again, that'll be up to the applicant. The other comment I have is on the survey and in the pictures, it shows the rear yard being stoned or having stones, and it looks like pavers are going to go on top of that. So we need some calculations on the lot coverage for the rear yard and total yard, just to make sure you comply with that. And again, you do get credit for what was there before that was impervious. You just can't make it worse, but we can mitigate the difference.
Roger,
Yes.
you said the fire chief said it complies? What do you mean it complies?
For gas, it meets all the setback requirements for a gas burning fire.
Got it.
It's
And
no
are
different
we
than-
going to change that?
Yes, I think we should, because I've been denying quite a few of these, and this is the first one that's coming from to the board. I think it's warranted.
Okay.
If it's a safety factor, we don't want the ashes and the sparks.
So they were designed for a wood-burning fireplace?
The ordinance was written with all intent of all the fire pits being wood burning, and they're not.
Okay, all right. Go ahead, sir.
Good evening. My name is Greg Heleniak. I'm the attorney for Mike and Pam Clark this evening. Just as a point of clarification from Mr. McCarnan's report, there was one variance request that we had on our application that I did not see make it to the report, which was a requirement for a spark screen, which is
That's not really a variance. That would be, that's just like a design feature of what's required, but it's more
Fair
the
enough.
size and shape of it.
Just wanted to make sure we were covering all bases under the
you.
requirements of the ordinance.
I saw that. It
Thank
wasn't a
you.
variance.
Thank you for the clarification. Mr. Clark himself is unfortunately out of town on business. Otherwise, he would be here this evening, but he's not even in the same time zone with us this evening. So, but we believe that everything you need to render a decision in this matter is before you in the packet that we've presented. If you'll indulge me, I'll go through the variances that Mr. McFarland already outlined and present our argument as to why we believe that a variance is warranted in this case. I think first to present or to address the fence issue, which was not included in our initial application, but was raised by Mr. McFarland in his report. The fence surrounding the property is a 6-foot fence. After the Clarks bought the property in 2013, there was a 6-foot stockade fence that surrounded the property. I understand that there was not necessarily a permit in the city's record for that original stockade fence, but it was in disrepair, and it was replaced in 2014 by a contractor. It was at the time it was understood that they would do all appropriate things that the city required. We're learning now that they never pulled a permit to replace that 6-foot fence in kind with the PVC board-on-board style fence. The Clarks are happy to put in for that permit, but because the fence is already existing and of a height higher than is permitted by the code, we would ask for a variance from that requirement to then go forward with a permit to legalize that fence. As for the 7-foot fence, it is a fence in material. However, that fence does surround an outdoor shower. So it's an elevated fence to allow water to go underneath the base of that fence, that fencing material that surrounds the outdoor shower. And the 7-foot height is intended to provide privacy for anybody in the backyard. I know it's only a foot, but you know, when you are in the outdoor shower, you may require a little bit additional cover. So and that was installed at the same time as the fence that surrounds the yard. So that's the information behind those fences. We would ask that you would legalize those, and we are happy to submit a permit application and any appropriate fees to make sure that the city has record of those fences on the books, along with any.
So on the survey, that 7-foot fence is marked as a 7-foot fence, but it's a shower enclosure?
Yes.
Okay, I'm fine with that. I don't think there's a variance required for that. It's actually less than what it's allowed to be. And as for the 6-foot fence, you know, we do allow people to maintain what they have, whether it's non-conforming or not. If they, in fact, you're an attorney, I trust you.
It's been 10 years. I would provide pictures of the previous stockade fence if I could, but it was a fence of that height that surrounded the property. They didn't make it any higher. It's also surrounded by trees, I believe, on the Clark side, but also on portions of the other side of the fence. So it's really just an enclosure. It's not a visual.
And I did find an old survey that showed a 6-foot wooden fence on there. So
You did?
yes.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr.
So I don't think a permit is necessary at this time. It's been in place for 10 years. I just
Well, I just don't like approving anything that we wouldn't approve in the first place, but if it's replacing a fence that was,
replacing a fence in kind.
yeah,
Yes.
then that's not
Thank you.
I was going to ask you to have 2 separate votes, but I don't think that would be necessary.
Appreciate that. As for the fire pit, this is, as Mr. McCarnan said, I think it's clear from the language of the ordinance that these are intended to be, the ordinance is intended to regulate wood-burning fire pits. This is a table-style natural gas-burning fire pit that will be directly plumbed from the main source at the house. The outside dimensions of the fire pit are 4 by 4, which is in excess of that 3-foot diameter that is considered under the wood burning regulations. But if you look on the plan that was submitted, or the schematic that was provided as part of our application, it looks like this. You'll notice that where it's labeled fire pit, there's 2 designations. The first is OD, which stands for outside dimensions of the fire pit, which is the 4 by 4. So that includes any concrete or material that makes up the structure of the fire pit.
Is it like a tabletop with a fire pit in the middle? Is that, or is the whole 4 feet a fire pit?
The whole 4 feet is, it's not a tabletop, but it's a furniture style, I'll call it a furniture style fire pit, independently standing fire pit. So the outside dimensions are 4 by 4, but the interior dimensions where the actual fire pit area are, I'm not sure where like the glass fire beads would be, and the fire apparatus that produces the heat is 28 by 28. So that while the interior dimensions would fall within the 3-foot diameter, it's just the whole structure itself is larger than that 3-foot.
That's what I meant. The fire part itself is,
28 by 28
Right,
inches.
okay.
Right. As for the height, because it's the structure, it is a bit higher than the 2 feet allowed under the wood-burning fire pit. I don't have an exact dimension, unfortunately, to offer you, but I would represent to you there would be no higher than 30 to 36 inches as a tabletop fire pit. The last are the setbacks. If you look at the plan that's provided, you'll notice that this fire pit is placed as central to the yard as it can between the rear of the home at about 11 feet and the rear fence at about 11 feet, and about 11 feet from the side fence as well. While the ordinance requires 15 feet from any structure, that would require moving the fire pit closer to the rear fence and the landscaping, the evergreen trees that are planted there for screening and landscaping as well. And obviously, we don't want to move it any closer to any of the structures on the site. The rear yard is only about 23 feet deep, so it is particularly shallow. I know that Mr. McCartney represented that this is a flexible C variance as opposed to a hardship, but it is a fairly shallow rear yard based on where the existing house is and where the rear property line is located. As Mr. McCartney said, a gas fire pit doesn't have a lot of the same concerns as a wood-burning fire pit. There isn't sparking. There isn't the amount of heat that puts off from a wood-burning fire pit. And 11 feet is the 11-foot setback from the structure is compliant with the New Jersey's UCC for placement of a gas-burning fire pit from a structure.
And if there was a new rules for gas fire pits, that would fit within those rules, correct?
Yes, I would consult with our fire inspector and make
Yeah,
sure
okay.
that it would comply.
So I hope Mr. Clarnon did relay that it's something that's on the city's radar, and we're just a little early to the party, I guess. But, you know, we would ask in consideration of the fact that it is compliant with the UCC, and it is a gas fire pit instead of a wood-burning fire pit, that the ordinance contemplates that the variance is requested for that placement as well. Yes, sir.
And the biggest benefit of the gas is there's no smoke. If you have wood burning, smoke could be going into the neighbor's house, in the neighbor's yards, the windows. There's not much smoke at all from this, right?
Agreed.
Gas.
There is no smoke. It's clean
That's
burning.
So much better than wood, correct?
Absolutely. It's clean burning. It doesn't put off as much heat for sure as well, which is also a safety consideration. There is heat that comes off for it, but I think we can all agree there's more for the ambient nature of making the backyard more enjoyable. We did hear before this hearing from one neighbor who said they wouldn't be here tonight, who lives at 410 North Douglas, so a nearby neighbor, who said she had no objection. She just asked that the gas line be turned off and secured whenever the Clarks are not at the home, and that's their intention anyway, but we would certainly, make that a condition of approval that the gas is turned off when nobody is at the house.
Another question. Do you know the size of the gas line that feeds it?
It is, the gas line schematics are included on the,
Is it the same as outdoor barbecue?
yes.
Craig, it looks like it's 1 inch.
1 inch, I'm sorry. It's a 1 inch line, which we buried.
But by turning off the gas line, you mean in the off-season, generally speaking, or not?
Generally, or any extended period where there would be nobody at the house, but there will be, a shut-off directly on the tabletop mechanism and a shut-off, I believe, at the either interior or exterior to where it connects to the house.
Anything else?
I have nothing else affirmatively to walk you through. We just believe this doesn't, cause any substantial detriment to the public good. We'd hope the board would find the same, and it doesn't impair the intent of the municipal land use or zoning plan, and actually only enhances the use of backyards for green purposes. There is one more thing. Mr. McCartney mentioned the landscaping requirement. Even though it's not outlined as a green area or landscaped area on the plan that was submitted, there is a designation for the impervious coverage and the impervious surface. That calculation already took into account the stone or cinder area in the backyard that was observed by Mr. McCartney in the photos. That total calculation comes to 55.4, and that includes all structures, driveways, and that stone, as well as walkways. So we're well above the 35% requirement for green area or landscaped area on the property, still with the installation of a future paver patio around the fire pit area.
So in Margate, the actual landscape coverage requirement has to be vegetative surface, not just pervious cover.
Okay.
So when you submit your compliance plans, make sure that that's differentiated.
We will.
And one other comment is, if the fire inspector who's going to review the plans has any comments, you're going to abide by his obviously you'll comply with his.
We will comply with any and all comments or other regulations that will be applicable.
Jim, you have any comments on it?
Any other questions from the board? I'd like to open up to the public. If anybody has any questions or comments, please come forward. Public portion is closed. Leo, would you read a motion, please?
I will. We comfortable doing one vote? We don't have to
Yes.
separate the
Yes.
fence out. All right. Typically, we like to hear some testimony, but given the type of application, I don't believe that's necessary. The board needs to hear any testimony. I think the attorney case was sufficient for an application such as this. But
There are no trees in the governor's strip. So will the applicant put trees in or add some type of landscaping to the property?
Where would
I'm
you
talking
like
about
to-
the governor's strip in front of the house, or, I mean, this is kind of meager looking landscaping.
the governor strip's the landscaping strip.
Or the
The
curb
governor's
strip.
strip is next to the curb. With new construction, we require 2 street trees. Just looking at the front of the house and the landscaping, it's a little
We've-
lacking, so.
We've been requiring applicants for variances to meet those requirements, so.
If the requirement is to plant 2 street trees, I'm sure my client
Right.
would plant appropriate street trees in the front yard.
The reason I didn't mention that is it's not a substantial improvement, but if the board has a right to request that, then I think it's a valid request.
So, no objection.
All right. If there's nothing else, we'll need, it's a C variance application. I'll summarize the variances, but we need a motion and a second for the following variances. The fence height is 6 feet or 5 feet is required. We heard the explanation, and that the 7-foot fence shown on the plan is actually a shower enclosure, so that's okay. The height of the fire pit is in excess of the minimum permitted 2 feet. The size of the fire pit, a 3-foot diameter, or about 7 square feet is allowed, and they're proposing 16 square feet, and that's the outermost portion. And then the fire pit setback, 15 feet is required, and they're at about 11 feet 1 inch. So those are the variances. There's the application checklist waiver. And then the conditions I noted were the following. When they submit the compliance plans, they'll provide the lot coverage and vegetative coverage calculations to Mr. McLaren's satisfaction. They'll abide by any comments from the fire inspector and abide by any other rules and regulations regarding fire pits. Per the neighbor's request, when the homeowners are not at the home for any extended period of time, the gas line will be turned off. And then they'll provide for 2 street trees in the governor's strip. The other conditions are the standard conditions we put in every application. Anything else in Mr. McLaren's report, unless otherwise agreed to, applicant will comply with any representations it made during the course of the hearing, and subject to any necessary outside approvals, if any.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Tom Collins?
As far as the presentation goes, the C2 variances seems to be justified. They are doing a improvement to the property. It is improving the neighborhood and improving the neighborhood values. Fire pit is de minimis because it's just, that's what fire pits are now. And a 7 square foot fire pit, you don't even get them anymore. You wouldn't be able to do anything with it. And since the fence is a identical replacement of an existing non-conforming use, I really don't see a problem. So I vote favor.
Richard Patterson?
I came in expecting to vote no on the fence until Mr. McLaren showed proof that it was a pre-existing fence. And as to the fire pit, I think this is a good example of why there's a planning board, because we have a rule, but it doesn't apply to this particular house. And it would fit in with the New Jersey rules because it's a gas fireplace, and the fire chief has approved it, so I vote yes.
Jim Galantino?
Technically, you could just take a regular barbecue and put it right on the fence line, and that would just be illegal by any standard. Fire department couldn't say anything about it. That justifies the argument for a gas pit, which is regulated by the gas valves and the location of the gas line in the ground. And I can support the variance on those aspects. I say yes.
Margaret Gubernalty.
My own. I think this is a de minimis application. I don't see any detriment to the public good or to our municipal land use law. The fire pit interior dimensions meet the requirements. The setbacks are compliant with the UCC. And I think this is safer than the wood sparks flying and the smoke. The fence, I agree with the other members of the board, has been existing, and I vote in favor of the application.
Craig Palmisano.
Yes, I agree that the gas fireplace is so much safer and cleaner than a wood-burning fire pit. And for a nice backyard to sit around a fire pit, I've sat at plenty of them, and they're not a problem. I don't see it. If there was a problem, the fire marshal would not let them be there. So I approve.
Remy Pelosi.
I approve and concur with the reasons given by my fellow board members.
Stephen Giuseppe.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with this. I see this gas fireplace much better than either charcoal or a fire pit with no smoke. So I approve.
And Michael Richmond.
Yeah, the fence was replaced in kind, and like Mr. Galantino said, by pulling the fire pit and having a gas line to it, you can't really move the fire pit to make it more dangerous, so I'm going to approve it.
The application is approved with 8 in favor and 0 opposed.
Next case is Paul Verna, 100 South Iroquois Avenue, Lot 10.01, Lot 1, located in the S40 zoning district, seeking C variance relief for front landscape and possibly others in order to construct a new single-family home. Taxes and water payments are current, and proof of advertising and notifying have been satisfied. Mr. McLarnon?
Thank you, Mr. Patterson, board members. Report is based on the application of Paul Verner, 100 South Iroquois Avenue, Block 10.01, Lot 1, located in the S40 zoning district. FEMA zone elevation 10, required first floor as a minimum is 10 plus 3 or 13 to the bottom of the floor. Background is as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the City of Margate to construct a new flood-compliant home and replace an existing non-compliant driveway location to be compliant by putting it on a side street. The applicant is seeking relief for front yard landscape requirements on the front where the driveway is required to be located. The significance of that is the driveway displaces some of the landscape. The property is a corner property with 2 front yards and 2 side yards by definition in the city's ordinance. So hardship and substantial benefit with the emphasis on substantial benefit variance. The hardship is it's subject to 2 front yards and setback requirements on the averages in 2 different directions on 2 different sides. The zoning schedule is on page 2, highlighting all the requirements. And in this zone, a lot area is required to be 4,000 square feet. This lot has 3,375 square feet, so it's existing non-conforming. A lot width is required to be 50 feet. They have 45 feet, and they have 120 feet of frontage total between the 2 fronts. So they meet all the other bulk requirements, and you get down to the 3rd floor area. Actually, that 3rd floor variance has been eliminated by adjusting the area of that 3rd floor, or the half story. So that leaves 1 variance remaining. And per my correspondence with the attorney today, I believe that he'll confirm that. So it's front yard landscape coverage on the Iroquois Avenue side, whereas a minimum required landscape coverage for any front yard is 60%, which may be reduced to 50% by the ordinance due to stairs to get up to the higher floor, and 46% is proposed. So it's basically a variance of about 4%. I'm not going to go through all my comments. Everyone has read the report. Again, the drive, by our ordinance, that driveway is supposed to be located on the side street, which they do. Currently is off of Atlantic Avenue, which backing in and out of that driveway is not a safe venture by any means, so this is a safety improvement. And overall landscaping is being met. Again, the attorney did confirm that with me today. And I do have a concern about the configuration of the parking in front of the garage. Looks like there's two spaces that kind of impede access to the garage. So if you could move one of those over, so if there's a car in the garage and a car in the driveway, you don't have to move both cars in the driveway to get out of the garage. So that's, again, I just want to mention that. So that concludes my report at this time.
Did you mention third floor area?
They eliminated that. And they were seeking one waiver, and I see for the copy of an area map showing all lots within 200 feet of the property. Again, they had to provide notice to everybody within 200 feet, and that has been supplied, just not a map, so that waiver could be granted.
May I proceed? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eric Goldstein on behalf of the applicants. As Mr. McLarnon noted, we did have quite a bit of back and forth. This was a tough one because the initial plan that came in, Roger had noted.
Just a moment, just for the record, Drew Campbell has arrived.
Roger noted that there were some easy fixes to get to less variances for the project. So over the course of about the past month, we've been corresponding, and a number of potential variances were eliminated, with Mr. McLarnon directing the applicant to comply, which the applicant's architect did. As Mr. Palmisano had questioned, the third floor is no longer a third floor. That would be too large. The applicant made that change, and the stair deduct takes us to 50% on the Iroquois landscaping only, but it meets the Atlantic Avenue landscaping, and everything else in the house complies, but there is a 4% shortage of landscaping only on that one side on Iroquois. As Roger noted in his report, there are a couple of existing nonconformities, and I do just want to read into the record the reference from the State of New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, but I do want to note that under 4055D-70C, by reason of exceptional narrowness, shallowness, or shape of a specific piece of property, that references the hardship that the applicant has. In this case, we have a lot which has two fronts and is undersized of record, but it is a buildable lot of record. So in addition to the flexible C, we're going to be talking about the hardship as well. With me to my left is Joe Slayton. He's going to be testifying as a licensed professional architect in the state of New Jersey. We will walk through the plan to a great extent, but we're really only talking about now a 4% landscape coverage variance on Iroquois. Everything is being met on Atlantic. A couple other things to note. This is a real substantial benefit to the town based on what's on that lot now. So if you look at what's there now, it is almost entirely non-compliant. You would call this a house that really is in need of being raised, R-A-Z-E-D, not R-A-I-S-E-D. This house deserves to come down. And by that I mean, if you look at Roger's report, which is ultimately very important, presently there is a 1.8-foot setback from Atlantic Avenue. That's being increased greatly to 11. There is a 2-foot setback to the porch on Iroquois, which is going to 6, and the building now is at 4 feet onto Iroquois, which is going to 10. Everything about this house, most importantly parking, which we all know is very big in the city now, 2 spots to 3, everything will comply with the exception of 4% of landscape coverage.
What about current landscaping? How good or bad is that?
It's bad. So the current landscaping is going from less than 35 to 35.
Well, I know it seemed to be a lot less.
A lot less.
Well, it just says, Roger has it as less. It could be as low as, 10 or 10, I don't, we didn't.
And it looked like the governor strips were concrete.
Governor strips are concrete.
And
The governor strip
they'll be grass
on
with
this
trees.
project will be grass. So it really is the prototypical marked improvement over what's there now. What's there now is not flood compliant. It actually was beat up pretty badly in Sandy. It's a nightmare. And what's going to be in this place, as Mr. Slayton will testify to in just a second, meets or exceeds all of your requirements with the exception of 4% of landscape. So Joe, if you could just walk us through, we don't need to go through what's there now, because clearly the board is aware of the non-compliant house that's there now. And Mr. Patterson, I just want to point out, a lot of times you'll say, would this be approved if it were brought before the board today? The house there now, I think we would get a phone call saying, don't bother coming to the meeting. It ain't getting approved. It's awful. But what's going to replace it is so much better and so much more flood compliant that I think when you look at the totality of the circumstances here, it really makes sense. The other thing I will point out, which is a huge deal in town, building coverage presently is 56%. That's insane. I mean, I don't know how this house got built. We're taking it down to 37.9, which, you know, is a marked increase. And as you pointed out, governor's trips will be maintained. So, Joe, you haven't been sworn by Mr. Manos yet, but I'm going to ask Leo to swear you in. I'm going to get your qualifications on the record as an expert in the field of architecture, and then you'll walk through.
Eric, just one point of clarification. Right when you started your intro, obviously we haven't had any sworn testimony. Mr. Campbell came in. Any objection to him participating
not
in
at all.
voting? Yeah, we haven't had any testimony, so.
Even if we did, I think the board's pretty much prepared.
Mr. Slayton, just your name and business address for the record, please.
Joe Slayton, 20 Lawrence Avenue, Barrington. Right.
That's good enough.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, please raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm the testimony you'll give tonight will be the truth?
Yes.
And Mr. Chairman, he was here somewhat recently. Do we need any refresher?
Well, I can put on the record, Mr. Slayton, you're a licensed architect with a good license and standing in the state of New Jersey, correct? Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'd ask that he be accepted as an expert in the
Yeah,
field of
we accept his
architecture.
qualifications.
So, Joe, if you could just walk us through the design of the house, specifically what we're looking for by way of the 4% landscape variance on Iroquois. And one other thing that Mr. McClarner pointed out during our back and forth to try to get us to kind of clarify a few things. The area underneath the porch is actually a spot for mechanicals for a beautiful pond that you can see in front. So the area that we're going to talk about in a second is not storage, it's not anything other than a place to put mechanicals out of the way. It'll be sound attenuated, and it'll protect everybody from the operation of the pond. So that also has been clarified with Roger and Mr. Zawacki, who drew the plan. So having said that, Joe, walk us through here.
The house is on a corner, and because of the way the site's laid out, it has two fronts, and with a corner house, you typically want to have an entranceway off the corner because it gives a better presence on the corner, if you may. So with that, there's two stairs, one up Atlantic and one up Iroquois that both meet to a landing and then approach the house at a 45 degree, which is where the front door is. There's also an elevator off to the side along Atlantic that has access to the house. The house is a raised house, as Eric has said. It's your normal house with regards to the complement of bedrooms and bathrooms for the area. Going back to the one concern about the third floor and that square footage concern, it was actually the mechanical room was calculated in with the square footage, and the mechanical room has a roof collar tie, so it is actually a lower ceiling height, which would take that out, just to clarify that for everyone here.
But we're not, just to clarify even further, based upon the city's comments and their input, we are not asking for any other variance but for the 4% landscape.
Correct, but I was just giving them the backstory as to the change or interpretation, if you may. So the 4% that is of concern is this calculation where you're taking it to the garage door, which is 18 feet, and previously it was calculated that would be calculated to the front of the deck, which this would conform under the old format in that respect. But with this newer format, I don't know, was it the last year or so that this was changed to the back of the garage, to the garage where you measure it to?
No, that's 7 years ago.
About 7 years ago? I'm sorry.
Time flies.
The front yard begins at the house, not at the porch.
Yep. So with that, the stairs, because they're two-sided on the corner, and you want to accentuate it with, we're accentuating with this water feature, this fountain in the front. That small area taken up for that second side of the stair actually probably would give you the 4% more you need. And if it was a wider lot, you would also get an increase in your percentage. So because of those two existing, one constraint, but the one for the lot, the other one for the design, is why we're asking for the relief.
And we don't get credit for this, of course, but you heard what Ms. Pelosi said earlier, that we've got a governor strip, very important to the city. Right now, it's not really maintained at all, but right upon construction of this property, it will be maintained with grass.
Right.
For time immemorial, okay.
I've got a comment, though, that it really doesn't apply to the percentage of landscaping, but ever since driveways have been eliminated on Atlantic and Ventnor Avenue for a good reason, we've had houses built, especially, I mean, those two streets are the showcase of Margate. We've had houses built without variances, so we have no say in them, with just a plain side along Atlantic or Ventnor Avenue. And this, to me, looks like the front of the house on both sides, and with the steps on both sides. We fight like crazy to have that facing the main streets to have some character to it, and I think you did a good job on that.
And that's another thing, Mr. Patterson, again, there are a number of homes, as you said, that get built without variances that you can't control. When we were looking at the architectural detail here, one of the important things for Mr. and Mrs. Verna was that the house blended in as if this were a front, to have more architectural relief instead of a long run of siding, which is what you see on some of the non-variance houses along Ventnor or Atlantic. So being that this is a kind of gateway through, and the way the street kind of runs in off of Iroquois, we think it's unique enough, but it looks like a front. It doesn't look like your typical side of a house that has a long run of plain, kind of no detail in the windows. You've got balconies, you've got windows, there's this cool little round window. I think Mr. Zawacki really outdid himself on this one.
It's just frustrating when we see the ones with flat sides and we can't do anything about them.
The architectural review is very important, but you don't have any say over the non-variance cases. So something like this, and what also is kind of cool here, you've got a wooden kind of an entrance, even though there's no actual door there. It breaks up, so you don't have a long line of brick that just exists from the bottom to the top. So having all of those architectural details in place, we think that this really does meet your intent on what needs to be on this corner. Now, of course, we do still need variances, but it's one now that the other was eliminated. Joe, I'm going to ask you, as an architect licensed in the state of New Jersey, in your professional opinion, could the 4% change the variance we're seeking have any possible negative effect based on what's there now and based on what we're going to build? Would that be considered a negative in any possible thought pattern?
No.
And to the extent someone could consider that 4% lack of landscaping a negative, would the benefits of everything that you and Mr. Zawacki worked on greatly outlay any such benefit?
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't have much more. I would like to have Mr. Slayton remain sworn. To the extent the board or members of the public have questions, we will answer them. But, it's 4% off of one corner. I know Roger had some questions about the parking. I guess we could look at that. I don't know if we could make a decision on that now, how to better configure that, but I know what he's saying, that you do have an issue where you don't have quite enough room, but
You're encroaching on the pavers to get to that stair. That's the only concern if you were to slide it towards the Atlantic.
well, we'll consider anything. I mean, look, the board always has good comments. We know that you all spend a lot of time looking at these cases, so if you think there's an idea we could run with, we will. We just, again, this is something which we've been back and forth on quite a bit.
Eric, can I ask Joe a question? Looks like enough. Joe, the BFE's 10. You get an air handler unit in the ground floor. You only have a foot space to work with. The air handler has to be above 14.
We'll make it comply.
All right.
As a condition
Has to go to
of
finished
the
first floor.
And as the board is aware, every project that gets approved that's going to be built new has to have a non-conversion agreement, which we will file, but also you're going to inspect and make sure that there's nothing in the floodplain, so we're fine with that.
Thank you.
So the first floor elevation is
16.
14, 15?
16. 16.
Yeah.
16?
16.5.
Again, beach block, we're up out of the floodplain. We know sooner or later there will be another flood, and the goal is to get as much public safety, health, and welfare concerns resolved now, so we're not dealing with an insurance claim later. Flood vents will be installed, of course, so we think this is a marked improvement of what's there now. And as the board is aware, under NJSA 40:55D-70, we do, I believe, meet the criteria for both the hardship and for the substantial benefit variance. So with that, we'll take any comments that the board might have regarding the parking, but otherwise, I think we're going to rest, and, if we have some colloquy back and forth.
I believe that DEP is going to raise that level, but I think Margate complies with what they're going to raise it to in
Margate's
most
already
cases,
at
correct?
BFE +4, and I think the other towns are now catching up. Margate's been very proactive with regard to the flood requirements, and other towns on both sides of Margate, including Atlantic City, have kind of lagged behind. And I think everyone here is probably aware that Longport just caught up to Margate this month by raising their base flood. So between Margate's floodplain manager and you all, you've been very proactive, making sure that these homes are out of harm's way, because we know another storm is coming. It's just a matter of time.
Eric, the 16 feet, that's above sea level.
16 feet above sea level, I think, yeah,
So
that's
it's
correct.
not, the house isn't
Oh, no,
16
no,
feet.
No, it's
The way you said
average
that, it
mean
sounded-
sea level, yeah.
Yeah, meaning that the BFE at this site is required to be 9 feet above the,
Oh, I'd have to do the calc, I don't have the.
but yeah, Mr. Collins is correct. The house itself won't be that high. It'll be that high off. I think this is like 6 or 7.
Yeah,
is the
7.5.
BFE. Okay, 7.5. So from there, you've got 8.5 feet. Yeah.
So the height of that rear or side yard deck, how high is that? Is that at grade, or is it less than 10 inches high off the grade?
Which side?
I presume it is, because there's no setback to it, so it can't be higher than 10 inches from grade. Ground floor plan on top right. Mark usually assigns an elevation.
Yes,
That's a grade.
yes, that's a grade.
Probably a couple inches above, just to get to.
Less than 10 inches.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And that can be conditioned if Mr. Manos wants to put in.
Yeah, we discussed that, I just forgot.
The governor strip trees, they're a condition, right? For the
Just on Atlantic Avenue, not on the beach block.
That's
2 trees.
But the Atlantic, we're going to put the trees on Iroquois on the beach block, and they'll always die there.
Yeah, that's not a condition, that's a
No,
requirement.
Requirement.
Requirement,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a very stringent requirement. Look, you guys, while you're landscaping, so we're going to give it to you, but obviously it comes at a little bit of cost, but we're going to do that.
Right, they're not on the plan, but,
It's in the report.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, this was not an easy one. I mean,
Any
Roger
questions from the board?
went back and forth a lot. This is what we've got.
Anyone here from the public have any comments or questions? Please come forward and state your name and then address, and then be sworn in, and then you can testify.
Tim Winfelder, 8306 Atlantic Avenue.
All right, Mr. Winfelder, do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say, I agree it's going to make a big improvement on that corner.
Are you a neighbor?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The walking mayor. Listen, without his kid, none of our kids would know a damn thing about sports.
But it's going to make a big improvement.
Thank
It
you.
looks real nice. Nice job.
Sir?
All right.
Just pause after you say your name and address so you can be sworn in.
John Pitts, 413 North Huntington Avenue in Margate.
All right, Mr. Pitts, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question. The third floor variance has been removed. Can you just briefly tell us what was
Sure.
changed to a...
So what happens is a lot of these houses have a bigger third floor that has to be only 50% of the floor below. When the plan, sorry, when the plan was initially prepared, there was an issue with regard to a height of a mechanical room. That's all been trimmed down, so now what we have is the actual livable space of the third floor is less than 50% of the floor below. And that's all thanks to Roger, so thank him, not
Great.
us.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks.
All right. Yeah.
Anyone else? Public portion's closed.
I do want to point out that the variance was 1 square foot. I mean, I was being picky, but it was on the plan, I had to point it out.
That's why it was so easy to eliminate.
Leo?
All right. It's a C variance application. It's just the one variance. It's for the front yard landscaping. The requirement's 50% with stairs, which they have, and they're proposing 46%. The conditions I noted, they'll put the 2 street trees in the Governor Strip along Atlantic Avenue, but not on the beach block, not on the Iroquois. And that side deck shall be, is it less than or equal to or less than 10 inches? Less than 10 inches from grade. And then I'll note that checklist waiver for the area map as well. And then the other conditions will be the standard ones, anything in Mr. McLaren's report unless otherwise addressed tonight on the record. Any representations made by or on behalf of the applicant during the course of the hearing, and subject to any other outside approvals that may be required.
8 sets of compliance plans.
And you'll submit the typical 8 sets of compliance plans. You'll have to comply with all Jimmy's issues in terms of the non-conversion agreement.
Can I make a motion? Make a motion.
Second.
Tom Collins?
You know, it's amazing, and I think, Eric, you know this, that probably a really strong portion of the variances that we grant on this board are because of corner properties, and they're also because of odd-shaped lots or inconsistencies in lots. In this case here, you would have had to have 60% landscape coverage on Atlantic Avenue and another 60% on Iroquois Avenue, which is absolutely crazy. This meets the C1 criterion in terms of a hardship because it's a corner lot, and you can't have as much on there as you really want. It also meets a C2 for its substantial improvement variance because we're eliminating a driveway on Atlantic Avenue. We are eliminating a really bad house that's overbuilt and not maintained. We are eliminating a flood-prone house, so we're meeting our FEMA regulations. And the way you guys design this, it's just absolutely magnificent. I mean, that is a beautiful house. You did a nice job. I wish everybody would take the time and effort to put into it what you did. So I think that's really nice, and it meets the standards, and I vote in favor.
Richard Patterson?
I agree with Tom about that. The 2 front yards creates a problem. I would again vote no on this if they didn't meet the overall landscaping, but they exceed or meet the overall landscaping, and they have a harder time than anyone else that's not on a corner. It's much easier for someone not on a corner to meet this. So it's so de minimis, I don't see a problem. So I vote yes.
Jim Galantino?
No more fluorescent lights. Wasn't that the house with the fluorescent lights? Do you remember?
I think everything about that house is bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Up on the 2nd floor. Yeah, there we go. Just on that alone, I got to vote yes.
Margaret Gubernalty?
I agree with Mr. Collins as well. I think that this is just an improvement all the way around to what exists. We improve the lot area, it's flood compliant, and the home is beautiful both on Atlantic and Iroquois. The benefits certainly outweigh the detriments, and I vote in favor of the application.
Craig Palmisano?
It looks like if you would have gotten rid of half of the staircase, you could have moved the parking over a little bit. That's the only way you're going to get. That's the only way you could have gotten the parking to line up a little bit better.
That's why we're here.
So the beauty of the steps going both ways on Atlantic Avenue corner, it's good. And if you got rid of the waterfall in front, you would get the 2% probably that you needed for the landscape. The water, it's beautiful, beautiful home, nice job, and I approve.
Remy Pelosi?
I agree with the other board members. This is de minimis, and it's nice to only have that one small variance on a new home, so that it complies and we don't have to switch a million things and people aren't trying to squeeze something into a lot that doesn't fit. So I appreciate your efforts, and I approve.
Stephen Giuseppe?
Yeah, compared to the other house that's existing, we're gaining property.
Certainly
We're
are.
gaining land. and we're gaining permeable space, which to me is really
We
important.
know how important that is to you, Mr. Executive.
That's very important to
We
me.
know we gotta come before this board, and it ain't easy, so.
And the trees are
yeah.
important to me, not Bradford pears.
No,
No more Bradford pears.
they won't be approved.
They gotta go. So, and I also like the design of the house because it's a hell of a lot better than these cookie cutter houses that are by right. I approve.
Andrew Campbell.
Pretty much everyone else took my thunder here on this board. I'm going to say yes. It's a beautiful project.
And Michael Richmond.
Yeah, it's a nicely designed home, and it's a vast improvement over what's there now. So I think it is a vast improvement to the neighborhood, and I'm going to vote yes.
The application is approved with 9 in favor and 0 opposed.
Thank you all.
Next case is Dennis DiSabatino, 27 North Exeter Avenue, Block 206.01, Lot 18, located in the S25 zoning district, seeking C variance relief for front yard setback to porch and possibly others in order to expand the front porch. Taxes and water payments are current, and proof of advertising and notifying have been satisfied. Mr. McLarnin?
Thank you, Board Chairman, Board members. This is the application of Dennis D. Sabatino, 27 North Exeter Avenue, Block 206.01, Lot 18, located in the S25 zoning district. I think this is an application I denied as a zoning permit. That is why they're here. The background is as follows. The background is the applicant is seeking relief to enlarge an existing non-conforming front porch into the front yard setback, requiring variances. Additionally, front yard landscaping may be made more non-conforming as well, and that information has not been provided. Again, a testimony can discuss that, whether it's actually it was unclear on the plans. So the zoning chart for this particular property in S25 is located on page 2, and documents reviewed on section 2, page 2, and continue on page 3. And the 3 variances that I've identified, and again, this is subject to testimony to clarify. Front yard setback to the porch or the deck, whereas the minimum required setback based on the prevailing setback is 8.14. The existing porch is at 6.16 feet setback, and 6.16 feet is proposed. Again, this is an expansion of a non-conforming setback. They want to widen the porch to make it more non-conforming linearly, not towards the street. Front yard landscape coverage, whereas the minimum required front yard landscape coverage is 60%, much less than 60% exists. An additional reduction in coverage is proposed. And it's minor, but again, it's have to do my due diligence and explain that. And if the front yard landscape coverage is reduced, the total landscape coverage is reduced. So again, that's an expansion of a non-conforming coverage. And I think the total landscape coverage could easily be mitigated by removing some of the concrete and reconfiguring the porch in the front a little bit, John. I think you can probably accomplish, mitigate some of that loss in the front yard. So I'm not going to go through all my comments, but the front yard setback requirements are based on the prevailing setbacks, and again, I'm pleading from the course on that the prevailing setback is a problem, but that's what we have to deal with. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. McLarnin. Mr. Chairman, may I proceed?
Yes.
Thank you. Eric Olson on behalf of the applicants. As Roger pointed out, this is an existing house. It's just a deck expansion, which is not expanding towards the street. He's correct. It's expanding in a linear manner for the remainder of the width of the house. So what exists now with regard to the setbacks is not changing. Roger's report, which we agree with, notes the existing porch is at 6.16. The proposed porch will also be at 6.16. Nothing is changing other than, as Mr. Obelenis will testify to in a minute, it's being extended just for a little bit more of the house to give them some more outdoor living space. DeSabatino's kind of went through the possibilities of a number of changes to the property, but wanted to have really the most limited, the minimal effect on their house, on their neighbors, rather than do anything else. They're really just filling in a portion of that porch in a fashion to make it go across the whole front. And it-
Mr. Goldstein, when I looked at that today, and the way the steps are situated now, it looked to me like if you extend that porch out, those steps are going to be in the driveway. Is that,
Well, Mr. Robelanis is going to testify to that, Mr.
Okay.
Patterson. Again, thank you for going out. I know how much time the board puts into this, so that's good that everybody's familiar with this, because we always spend a lot of time on this ourselves. So, based on Mr. McLaren's earlier comment, DeSabatinos are here. They would be willing to remove some concrete if that helps, free up some landscaping. Again, you know how important that is, so we can talk about mitigation in that regard. But before we get there, I do want to have John sworn and have him testify as to what he's planning on doing, and he'll get to the issue regarding the steps, Mr. Chairman. So, John, if you don't mind, please, Mr. Manos will swear you in, and then we'll get going with your testimony about the property.
All right, Mr. Obelenis, just your name and business address, please.
John Obelenis, 102 South 8th Street, Vineland, New Jersey.
Okay, please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you'll give tonight will be the truth?
I will.
Thank you.
okay?
John, you've obviously been engaged to work on this project. You're a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey. Want to ask the board to accept Mr. Obelenis' credentials as an expert in the field of architecture?
Yes, we accept his credentials.
John, walk us through the plan. We'll talk about the stairs, mitigating some of that concrete. Tell us what you've designed for the Sabatinos to have the most possible outdoor space that they could have without doing a major renovation to the house.
Yes, thank you. Obviously, by putting the patio across the full width of the house, it allows them for much more space to have entertainment in the front, larger family. It's a more easier space to use with that full width of the house. Now, two issues that came up, which was the landscape issue, which I'll address, and the stairs, is that we're actually clipping off about 2 square feet of the corner of that we call the landscape front. It's really mostly gravel and some shrubs and stuff, but where the curve is on the plan here, just a piece of it, with the patio coming across, it's gonna clip off a little bit of that grass area, and that's it. Most of the lot is all concrete. The driveways are concrete, the front is concrete, there's no governor strip. And basically, when we add this porch across the front of the house, we're building on top of concrete. We're not taking away from the landscape in the area. So it's being built on concrete that's already there. And the stair issue is that rather than jutting all the way out and blocking the driveway, this is about a 15-foot wide driveway. The setback itself is 12 feet and change. So the thought was not shown in the drawing here, but just basically run it along the side of the house. Have it come to a landing and run the stairs along the length of the house, and that will impede with the drive. We'll still have about 12 feet of driveway left over once we do that.
There's an existing steps in the driveway now, right? Like halfway up, like where the kitchen would be?
Yeah, the rear yard.
Right.
The rear door.
Yeah, the rear door.
Are you gonna go towards the back of the house?
Yes, we're gonna go toward the back.
Okay, that-
Yeah, we're not gonna build toward the front. We're
and
not
you're
gonna
not going
build.
straight down, you're going landing and then towards the back.
Yeah.
John, the driveway says 11 feet, doesn't it?
Well, that's your setback. That's the side
That's to
yard
the
setback.
landing. That's to the landing. The driveway is
Okay,
14,
all right,
yeah.
okay, good.
And
So we have plenty of room to
Mr.
put a 3-foot
Mr.
stair.
McLaren, Mr. Patterson, Mr. DeSabatino's here. The idea of the landing makes it a little easier to get in and out. It's kind of important to have that.
Well, when you get to be their age, I understand.
They're about 5 years younger than you.
Yeah, I know they are.
Careful. So that is important as an aspect of this project. It's not just for aesthetics, it's also for a fair amount of convenience. None of us are going to be able to walk and go up and down stairs forever. So, John, you took that into consideration as well
yes.
when you were designing this, to have some future means of ingress and egress that won't be difficult as we, of course, age. All right, that's good.
And Eric, this house was lifted
Yes.
2015? Okay, congratulations. Good move.
They weren't the owners.
Yeah.
Is that?
They weren't the owners. Sobs.
They bought it.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. DeSabatino just is here. They'd like to testify briefly, just to talk about their goals here.
Have them sworn in?
Sure, Mr. DeSabatino, just state your name and address for the record. I'll get you sworn in real quick.
Dennis DeSabatino,
And,
27 North Exeter.
and Mr. DeSabatino, please raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Dennis, tell us about the house a little bit, your goals, the reason you hired John to prepare this plan, what you would like to do here. So you want to make it as easy as possible to get in and
Well,
out.
aesthetically, we wanted to use the whole 24, 25 feet, because we do entertain a lot up here with 4 grandchildren. And purposes for my wife, we would like to have at least one landing, and going down to the side of the house, which we already have stairs from the side of the house coming that way. It won't be any wider than the stairs that are already existing on the side of the house. And we do have a 15-foot driveway, so we have plenty of room.
Your goal was to minimize the impact, of course, on your neighbors, but to give you the best possible result so you can spend some time outside and enjoy the outdoor space with your family.
Yes.
Very important. Mrs. DeSabatino's here if you'd like to hear from her, but I think it's fun to give you a feel for who you're talking to. This is someone who has the best interests of the city, of course, but also their family so they can spend time outdoors, which we all like to do in Margate.
And they're improving an existing house that's been lifted, and we're not having a giant house put on a little lot,
It's out
so.
of the floodplain, and the family can sit up there and really enjoy the views down the street.
Well, I think this board has always.
We're living here full-time. I like to say
I
that.
understand, but we've always kind of encouraged the more front porch area is more talking to the neighbors area. And it really, I think, and the board has said in the past, that it's nice for the ambiance of the neighborhood if neighbors get to know each other. And so we've always kind of
And
looked
it's a real
favorably
nice
on
street
front
there, too.
porches.
That block of Exeter is very nice, kind of wide, you got cars parked on both sides, so people get to know each other. If you're out on the porch, you're certainly going to have an opportunity to see everybody walking back and forth, whether it's Hot Bagels or the businesses along Venter Avenue there. So, yeah, we think that's a marked improvement, but I do have some questions just to ask John.
Go ahead.
for the
Just one
procedural-
quick question before you go. Could you just explain what other, I noticed when I went by today, you're doing other improvements. What else are you doing to improve the house?
What else are we doing
Yeah,
to
I mean,
improve?
what are your plans for, you're gonna do some landscaping and things like that?
Yeah, I do landscaping every summer. I usually put a hibiscus in Mandeville. That's full in the summer. That small area every year I full.
Would you put in the governor's strip that's, looks like it's one of the only ones that doesn't have it, the grass next to the,
Sidewalk?
yeah, next to the sidewalk
Sure, that's no problem.
with street trees?
Yeah, that's no problem. The more green, the better for me. I mean, I'm coming from the suburbs with full lawns for the last 45 years, and I wasn't left much. I took up all the flagstone that was in the back of the house, and I did put grass there, about a 35 to 40-foot strip by about 10, 15.
Yeah, I didn't want you to have to buy a lawnmower just for that front grass strip, so if
Wow.
you already have one, that's okay then.
Even though I'm catching up to you, I do have a landscaper come and cut that back.
Mr. Obelenis, you've prepared this plan, you've testified, you've heard what Mr. Sabatino says, you've heard what the board says. In your professional capacity as an architect licensed in the state of New Jersey, could you see any possible negative associated with this minimal project that you prepared?
No, I see this as completing the look of the house with the porch going all the way across the front and comments about the public availability, all the works.
And based upon the state of New Jersey municipal land use law, do you think to the extent there could possibly be any negative associated with this application, the positives would greatly outweigh any such negatives? Patterson, I believe we've satisfied the requirement of the land use law in Margate zone code, but we will have Mr. Obelenis and Mr. and Mrs. DeSabatino ready to retort if anyone has questions, but we would rest at this time.
Anybody else on the board have any questions? Anyone here from the public have any comments or questions? Public portion's closed. Leo, read a motion, please.
Sure. Roger, just so I'm clear, I thought Mr. Obelenis testified this is going over concrete, but we are reducing these variances are still, for the
Yeah.
landscape coverage, are still applicable.
Looks like a portion of it's going across dirt.
Okay, so we should include those.
You'll mitigate any,
Even though it's
Roger, I
not
don't
his
think any of
property,
it's
he's
going
putting
across
grass in
dirt.
the front.
right,
It's only going over the concrete.
okay.
Okay. So maybe we just say coverages shall remain as existing?
Coverage will not be made worse.
Will not be made worse, okay. So,
They're putting in a governor's strip
That's Governor's Strip, that doesn't count
They
as
don't get a
coverage.
credit for
It makes the neighborhood look
We don't get
nicer,
credit for it,
doesn't
but of
count.
course, it does beautify
Yeah,
the neighborhood.
yeah.
It's more landscaping, and we know how important that is, of course, so.
All right.
It's 2 in a row. I don't know if we're going to get 2 in a row ever.
So I
Take
think,
what we can get.
I think it's just one C variance. We need a motion in a second. It's a front yard setback to the porch. It's at 6.16 feet now, but they're going across where the requirement's 8.14 feet. So that's the variance. The front yard landscape coverage and the total landscaping coverages will not be made worse than existing conditions. I'll note that. They'll put the governor strip with the street trees. There's the waiver for the area map, and then the other conditions, again, the standard conditions, anything in Mr. McLaurin's report, unless otherwise addressed, any representations made by the applicant, subject to any outside approvals, if any.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Tom Collins?
Again, this is a pretty simple cut and dry. It meets the C2 criterion. It is a substantial benefit to the neighborhood and the house. You're not coming forward to the streets, and you're not really making your coverage worse. You're just going to finish off across the front of the house. You're adding landscaping, adding trees, and governor strip, so it's going to really make a big difference in that neighborhood. I think you'll be happy with it, and I think everybody in the neighborhood will be too, so I vote in favor.
Richard Patterson?
Well, this is the third case in a row I came in with some negative feelings, thinking those steps were going to actually extend into the driveway. But again, once you hear the testimony at the meeting and see what's happening, that's not going to be a problem. There's not much to say here. It's not putting anything closer to the street. It's very de minimis, and I think it really helps the socialization and niceness of the neighborhood, so I approve.
Jim Galantino?
It was one of the first houses that came out of the ground after Sandy.
Was it?
Yeah, the Soddens. They got a grant from the New Jersey REM program, and they took advantage of it. It could have been a two and a half story home. If you think about it, parking underneath. So that alone should grant it the variance. Just a standard old property. It's elevated. I vote yes.
Margaret Gubernalty?
Yeah, this is a de minimis request. It's an expansion of existing nonconformities, so nothing's really changing. I see no negative impacts. They have a growing family and grandchildren and enjoy your new porch, and I approve the application.
Craig Palmisano?
Yeah, I agree with the other board members on this. I approve.
Remy Pelosi?
I approve as well, and I applaud the efforts to put more green in. So, thank you.
Stephen Giesecke?
Yeah, I think we all like the idea of preserving the older homes. And I don't understand why anybody needs a gardener, because we can all do our lawns with a battery-operated weed whacker. Yeah, I approve. That works.
You do
Andrew Campbell?
Do mine too.
I respect your carbon footprint in making it greener. I appreciate that as well. And I vote yes.
Michael Richmond?
It's a nice neighborhood, and I really don't think this has any effect on the neighbors or the neighborhood, and I think it fits into their neighborhood, and I'm going to vote.
The application is approved with 9 in favor and 0 opposed.
Thank you.
Next case, Marco A. Arnone, 13 North Gladstone Avenue, Block 207.02, Lot 41, located in the S25 district, seeking C variance relief for location of third-floor deck, front yard setback to house, left side yard setback, and possibly others in order to renovate the existing single-family home. Taxes and water payments are current, and proof of advertising and notifying have been satisfied. Mr. McLaurin?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, board members. The report is based on the application of Marco A. Arnone, 13 North Gladstone Avenue, Block 207.02, Lot 41, located in the S25 zoning district. FEMA flood zone elevation 9. Seeking C variances, planning and zoning report deemed complete. This is not a hardship variance, it's a substantial benefit variance, although the size of the lot, the shape of the lot is a little unusual, so they can apply as they see fit. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinances of the city of Margate to add a half-story onto an existing two-story single-family dwelling. The side and front yard setbacks are existing non-conforming and require variances to expand them, which they're doing. So a little backstory, we met several times to go over the application and made some recommendations, and some things didn't work out structurally, so that's why they're here for that third floor or that half story. They would have to cut in to meet the side yard setback, and structurally wouldn't be able to be supported. Going back to my report, page 2 is the zoning chart, and I've highlighted the variances, and again, this is going to be another case where I believe some of these variances are to be eliminated tonight by clarification. Documents reviewed in section 2 on page 3, and the variances required as identified are as follows. Front yard setback to the porch and deck, whereas a minimum required setback based on prevailing setback is 8.97 feet. 5 feet exists, and about 7.58 feet is proposed. Again, as you go towards the right, the front yard setback increases because there is an angle in the front yard property line. Front yard setback to the building, there is an existing enclosed porch on the first floor. They want to extend that further up. So if the ground floor is non-compliant, the second floor becomes non-compliant. Whereas a minimum required setback based on the prevailing setback is 14.15 feet. 5 feet exists and 5 feet is proposed. Again, it's an expansion of a non-conforming setback. The third variance is as follows: the side yard setback to the building on the left side, whereas the minimum required setback is 5 feet. 3 feet exists and 3 feet is proposed. Again, that half story, it's continuing upward at the 3-foot setback, and again, it's an expansion of a non-conforming setback. Building height, graphically, I looked at their plans, and it showed it greater than 30 feet from the starting point. I think that might have been a graphical error, if possibly. Okay, so it's not a variance? Building height?
Well, I would like to talk to you about it.
As of now it is, but I think we're gonna walk through the plan, yeah.
Okay. And eave height, whereas the maximum eave height for a third floor is 18 inches from the eave. Height measured from the top plate of the second floor and about 9 feet is proposed. And again, it's for that small section on the left side in the 3-foot setback. So waivers requested, copy of an area map showing all properties within 200 feet. Again, the applicant has notified everybody within 200 feet, so that waiver could be granted without any detriment to the application. And again, this is front yard setback requirements, all based on the prevailing setbacks within 200 feet of the property in question. And the angle in the front yard makes it a moving target. The side yard setback requirement of 5 feet is not being met, and then again, that is a variance. Again, just some clarification that the testimony will provide, and hopefully provide some of the missing information that would be beneficial to the board to make a proper decision on this. So floor areas, I just want you to confirm the area of the second floor versus the third floor, make sure that's compliant. And I know that Eric and I have discussed this yesterday also, and so he knows what I'm asking for. Thank you.
May I proceed, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you. So, by way of background, this one, you really put us through the ringer. We started this process in November, going back and forth on kind of reaching the right design. And Mr. and Mrs. Arnone were very patient because we wanted to get this correct, but it did take quite a bit of time to get here because of all the iterations of the plan, as well as them figuring out what they wanted to do. A lot of thought went into this design. We're going to hear from Mrs. Arnone in just a second, who's going to give you a bit of a preamble before turning it over for our professional testimony with regard to architecture. But Roger and I did go back and forth a little bit with regard the past couple of days to his report, and we're lucky enough that our professional, who's going to testify in a minute, did prepare a response point by point, which we'll go through. But before we get to that, I do want Mrs. Arnone to testify a little bit because she's been waiting, not so patiently, but we're here, and she's ready to testify a little bit about her thoughts as to how we got here, which I think is important before we put the actual case on. So come on up,
Okay.
Mr. Manos, the attorney will have you sworn in.
Mrs. Arnone, just your name and address for the record.
Deborah Arnone, 13 North Gladstone Avenue.
And please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give tonight will be the truth?
I do.
Great, thank you.
Let the process a little bit. I know you want to get this. Go ahead.
So I've been a resident of Margate for 46 years. My parents were on Lancaster. Of course, 24 years ago, we purchased on Gladstone. For us, it's family. Everything's family. We have our cousins living next door, cousins living across the street. It was imperative to me that when we were deciding to update this house, that I wanted to keep the character of Margate, because as you know, there's a lot of those homes that are going up, as this gentleman had said, they're like cookie cutters to me. And we did not want to raise the house. I wanted to try to eliminate as many steps as possible. I don't want an elevator. Just keeping the character within Margate. If you look at the aerial shot of our property, our backyard is like Sherwood Forest, and we plan to keep it that way. We're probably one of the few homes that have pine trees and also have holly trees. Oh, that's Steve? Okay. Hi, Steve. So anyway, it was really important to us to keep all that. We've been blessed with the ground that we do have, and we want to keep that all intact. The design of the house, my husband and I, we took a lot of time to do it just to try to keep the character within our block. We have fabulous neighbors, and we just want to plan on retiring here in a few years. To us, as I said, the family's very important. I want my children to grow up with their children as I did down here. So we would appreciate you accepting this, and we hope to hear.
Now, one thing I want to point out, which Mr. Manos and Mr. McLaurin are aware of, I'm not sure the board members are, we did submit, and we know that it's hearsay, letters from 6 of the surrounding neighbors supporting this. They're not here, but I think...
Yeah.
Well, when the public speaks, you can talk. But we did submit quite a few letters, and we understand that the letters have the weight that the board decides to give, but the neighbors have been intimately involved with the design. They've spoken to the Arnones, and they have 6 of them, and a couple are cousins and family members. I think, did you submit one? He's also a relative.
cousin.
Lucky us.
So if it
Point
doesn't get
being,
approved, long summer on the
when you
beach.
say this has been a long time, it's not just been a long time in the design, but it's been a long time in the family members discussing this with the people that are going to be affected by it most, which really does bring out, in my opinion, the great character of our town, because they wanted to make this special. They didn't want to burden anybody without letting them know. And then, people sent letters, and they sent a couple to Mr. Manos, a bunch to Mr. McLaurin without even letting me know, so it was great. So we probably want to talk to you again. Let's get
Quick question, Eric.
Yes.
You said you're going to maintain your landscaping, so
Absolutely.
the tree in the front and the existing landscaping?
Yes,
is
we have
staying?
2 trees in the front. I believe we have 10 arborvitae on the right that we chose to have for privacy from our neighbor. And then, of course, we will be putting back, all the shrubbery and everything, after construction. So that will be all grass still. I don't want any stones. I don't like any of that. I'm a garden person, and I won an award several years ago for my garden. So we plan to keep it that way.
I don't think I met you before, but I lived at 15 North Gladstone when my house was torn down, just for
Really?
the wintertime.
This one here? This is
The one with the giant backyard.
Yeah, that's his son's previous house.
Yeah, it was it was your son's house, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I didn't say I liked you as a neighbor, I just said.
This really goes to what we're trying to accomplish, the character of keeping things as nice as they can be without disrupting the neighborhood. But we do have to put some architectural testimony on. So, have the mic? Leo, if you could.
If I need a mic?
Oh,
Well,
sure.
I'm a big man, but I need a mic, so go ahead.
Is it Mr. Grimaldi, or am I presuming something by looking at the plans?
Piero Grimaldi, Piero Grimaldi.
And your business address?
It's 222B Horsham Road, Horsham, PA.
Okay, Mr. Grimaldi, please raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm the testimony you'll give this evening will be the truth?
Yes.
Okay, and want to just make sure he gets qualified. Thank you.
You heard Mr. Manos for you. And of course, just give us your qualifications, specifically noting your ability to practice architecture.
Well, I'm a licensed architect in New Jersey, PA, New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland.
And you prepared the plans tonight?
Yes,
You've practiced architecture for many years, I would assume?
25 years licensed.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask you be...
Yeah, we'll accept his qualifications.
Thank you. Okay, walk us through the plans. We know there are some things we need to go over with Mr. McLaren, but before we get to that, just walk us through what you've designed, how we got here, and, tell the board why we believe what you prepared is a better alternative to what's there now, and more importantly, a better alternative to tearing down, because, as you heard Mrs. Arnone, that wasn't in her wheelhouse at all.
Well, I think we'll discuss the variance that Mr. McLaren is requesting, but I believe that two major variances is for the front yard setback and then the side yard setback. The original house is 3 feet from the property line, and the front of the house is 5 feet. You can see how the street angles in and then turns, so their front yard goes from, I would say, like 12 feet down to 5 feet, so it's an unusual lot. So we're proposing to build on the existing footprint of that house, not changing the first floor at all. We're going over the first floor sunroom and building master bedroom over the sunroom, and then a partial third floor on this side. So I'm showing, you can see from this picture here where we're proposing, this is their original deck now. We want to build, not going beyond this point, the second floor, and then you can see where we don't have the 5-foot requirement. There is the driveway there that's there now, that in the future, if they tear down the house, they would never, I would assume they would never move the driveway to this side, that there would never be impeding on another home that would be placed there. So that's why I'm asking relief for the 3 feet that's existing, building on that 3 feet to extend to the second floor and into the third floor.
But the 3 feet won't become less than 3 feet at all?
No.
It's going to remain at that?
At the existing footprint.
Correct.
And another hardship, which I can show, that, look, as an architect, I want to try to avoid variances. So I try to work with Mr. McLaren, but unavoidably, we have a staircase on the first floor, which goes to the first floor, which goes to the second floor. As you get to the second floor, to the third floor, if we went in 2 feet, we would have no headroom. So there is no way to get to the third floor because you would have a 3-foot wall roof coming up, and it just physically wouldn't work. So
And
the whole
interestingly-
third floor, which they're requesting for grandchildren, cannot work. So we
Yeah,
could.
that's one thing to point out, which is very interesting, as Mrs. Arnone said earlier. The one way you could have avoided variances here is to tear the house down and put up
Yes,
the house. But we didn't want to do that, so
Yes.
in working with the existing, almost by its very nature, the house is non-compliant. You just can't do anything without a variance.
Correct.
And that's your professional
So in
testimony.
blue here, you can see the existing first floor. So on the second floor, we're extending literally over the exact footprint of the first floor. So we're not going beyond any original setback that the building had. And on the third floor, this bay, part of the bay of the bedroom does not go past their original front door of their house. So we're not going past any existing setback that the house originally had. Which brings us to we did the setbacks along the whole street, the average, and we cannot meet the front yard setback. So as you can see with the street, again, because it's curving in, we only literally have 5 feet to the start of the building. And you can see how tight these houses are on the corner, and then for reference, Castles is right there.
So is it your testimony that, based upon the shape of the lot, you're almost in the worst possible spot
Correct.
with the jut in? You can't do anything on the 90-degree angle, because just very much by the angle that goes out towards the street,
Right.
you've got one side of the property that's closer to the sidewalk, one side that's further away.
And since I am right here, I know how impossible it is to try to park on this angle when you're looking at the house that's straight and the street is curved.
I would submit, Mr. McLaurin, just as you said in your report, whether it's a hardship or not, I think because of all the historical development on the street and the way the homes are built, this would qualify under the hardship variance because the shape of the lot, although not uniquely narrow, at the front, it has just enough of an oddity that we can't comply. So keep that in mind. I hope that, when you're considering the vote, that it does kind of cause a bit of a hardship. It's not horribly so, like a small corner, and we do meet a lot of the other requirements. But as you can see in this schematic,
You can see
we
it's
lose some
5
space.
feet here, and then it goes to 14 feet at the end of the property.
Well, I think that's a pretty decent-sized hardship. I mean, the lot's very weird. In the
Yeah.
Well, I didn't want to say.
I don't
I
think
agree,
that's
Mr.
a little hardship. I think that's and plus, you're still at 5 feet. That's kind of like the minimum front yard setback, right? So
It's the hardest street, it's the hardest house on this street. I went down and took a very close look. Everything else is straight. You've got that area that kind of comes around, probably past your house, but this one is kind of smack on that angle.
I just want to point out, in 2005, they did an addition, and they were able to meet the 5-foot setback, because it was possible. And in our case, in the front, we can't. So we do try to meet the requirements of the zoning board.
My only comment about the hardship issue is that used to be an open porch and then it was enclosed, correct?
On the second floor. The first floor is always the sunroom.
Always a sunroom.
Yes, right here. This is enclosed right now.
Right.
So there's a deck on the second floor of it.
Right. But at one point in time, that wasn't a porch?
Nope, because my property is the same, it has a sunroom also, never an open porch.
So what, I'm still kind of a little perplexed about the eve height thing. Why is
Yeah.
that a variance? Or should I be asking you that?
We
talk about it.
can get to that, yeah.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Richmond. Tell us about the e-bike.
Everything's going to fall off of this
Want
one.
me to take that?
The question is, and I mentioned about the addition that was done in 2005. So when they did this rear addition, which is not shown, it's back here, if this continues, they had to meet the floodplain requirements. So the first floor, when you go to the addition, is 14 inches above their first floor. So they're above the floodplain for the back of the house. So when I did my calculations, the base flood elevation plus 11 and a half inches based on the flood cert, I went less than 30 feet from that point. So I was taking my measurement, Mr. McLaren, from their first floor of their new addition.
Okay. That doesn't work, though.
Okay, so if we take it from the first floor, the original first floor, then it's 14 inches to their first floor. We would be roughly 11 inches over the 30 feet. Now, that 11 inches is just a point, a triangle that's roughly
Right. I agree.
12 feet, or 24 inches by 24 inches by 12. It's not like it's 30 feet long over the requirements. It's literally 24 inches by 24 inches by 12 inches high,
So Pierre,
if we
just to
were granted
clarify
that
for the record-
variance.
Pierre, just for the record here, would you consider that portion a de minimis section of the roof?
No.
No, de minimis meaning small.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Yes.
That's what I meant,
So
sorry.
the portion that ultimately would be above, and just for the record, Mr. McLaurin and Mr. Chairman, I did advertise for any and all variances because I did not advertise for height, but any and all is the catch-all in this case. We do have the ability to go forward on this. It's not a D because it's less than 10% of the overall height, but you would consider that portion that's too high de minimis compared to the rest of the roof?
Yes.
Okay.
And I also, so because of the requirement is a 512, minimum 512 pitch, I could try to reduce the pitch of the roof to 412, but then it wouldn't meet the zoning requirement for minimum pitch. So if this roof is 512, if I brought it down to 412, it would give me that extra 12 inches, but, so we're splitting hairs, whether you're giving the variance to lower the roof.
What's the
Height variance
Yes.
is we'd be giving a
Roof
variance,
pitch
which is-
variance.
What's the ceiling height?
The ceiling height is 8 foot on the
Roof.
third floor, so 7 foot starts to affect the window heights, and then it's too close to the floor.
I'm sorry, I just,
I'm sorry,
somebody else was talking. What's
8
the
feet.
ceiling height?
8 feet.
So if you went 4/12 pitch,
It wouldn't change the inside at all. It would just change,
It would just change the height.
this from, it will be 12 inches lower than this.
you'd still get the same height in the room.
Right.
Yes,
correct?
exactly.
It wouldn't change anything on the interior. It's really the board's
I would-
Chinese menu, one from column A, one from column B. Would you rather have the house be a little bit higher but not need a roof pitch variance, or would it be better to bring it down and then we'd have to apply for a roof pitch variance
I
now?
think it looks better with the 512.
Exactly.
So do I. I mean, it's-
Personally, I think it looks better, and for the small amount of area that's over, I would rather get a variance for that area, not reduce the pitch.
And Pierre makes a good point that if that roof was in the back of the house, it'd be compliant.
Yeah.
Why?
Yes.
And it's just a
Because
point, right?
It's a
not
point.
a ridge.
It's
like
not
a
a long
2
20-foot
square
ridge.
feet.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
a
But
point.
that still doesn't answer my question
Okay,
about the
sorry.
E
Talking about
height.
the E, right.
Why
Okay, so
is it E?
that's another part of his
Right.
questions.
Yeah.
So I've talked to Mr. McLernan. We went in to submit for a permit, and it was denied, so I went in to try to understand. So imagine this roof not being there. I had this as a 3-sided third floor, where there's a wall on 3 sides coming out of the roof, and he mentioned that you can only be 18 inches out from the second floor plate. So I propose of wrapping the roof around and adding more roof to the back of the house to try to encompass this
Right.
third floor to hide it, so we
And he
didn't.
did a good job at that. With what, it's hard to retrofit an existing home to make it
Exactly.
fit with the eave height.
So we
that
tried to
section on the
hide
lower-
the.
Wait,
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So go ahead.
So that rendering on the lower left,
You can see this here.
Right.
where you start seeing the wall, that's an eve height variance right there. Because that's not a dormer, that's.
Right here.
Right.
Right here?
Right here. So originally, this went around the house, 3 corners. So I added all this roof here to try to hide this
Right.
portion. And you can see on the front how that's hidden. And then the front roof comes down, that hides the whole third floor here,
Right.
which is over here.
The first rendition, it was a full
It was
third.
a lot more
Right.
exposed.
And he did a great job pushing everything in and covered it with a roof. But there's a little bit left. I put it on there just to,
Right. Okay. Okay.
the idea is to hide that third floor
Yes,
underneath the roof.
the-
You
the
can't-
whole
you can't do it on an
concept of
existing house. You
fitting in the fabric is, they like the idea of like a 2-story house, low house, but they needed the third floor, and everybody wants the view from the third floor.
Okay.
But the 5/12 versus if you were to approve a 4/12, if we went that direction, it's not creating any more shade or blockage of light to the neighbors in any way, is it?
No.
It really,
I just think I'd like the look better of a steeper pitch.
it's a reduction of a
Yeah.
foot. It doesn't,
I like it, looks better too, but I think from a board perspective and people looking for height variances, we haven't granted a height variance in 10 years. I mean,
Well, can I propose?
it just brings in other people looking for height variances.
Yeah, but each case is on its own merit.
I understand
mean,
that.
You're talking about a pyramid. You
I know what we're talking about.
Right,
He just explained that.
right. You know,
I'm just telling you my opinion, and that's,
We're open to
Mr. Patterson,
whatever you guys
the,
want to do.
applicants, very proactive in the design they're here. They don't care. They said if it makes it easier and the board would rather go to the pitch, they would do the 412 pitch. We would comply with height, and it would only be a pitch variance for a portion of the roof as well.
It's only 11 inches.
Yeah,
It's 11 inches.
so we can change that pitch to comply. It won't change the inside ceiling, the floor height, so why don't we go with that?
Okay.
On another subject, you're adding 2 bedrooms, is that correct? Yes. You're going from 4 to 6 bedrooms?
Now we're deleting one bedroom.
Well, there's 2 bedrooms up on the 3rd floor, correct? Bedroom 5 and 6, it says here. And a loft. So that calls for 4 parking spaces, correct, Roger?
They do have a 2-car garage and enough room for probably
Yeah.
3 cars in the driveway.
Three in the
4
driveway?
cars?
4. So there's actually 6 parking spaces, Mr. Palmisano.
And then
Okay,
my driveway.
And another thing, as an architect, I've seen bump outs for staircases and elevators and such. So if only the staircase was bumped out to that 3-foot setback, And that bedroom number 5 wasn't bumped out.
We looked at this.
So
and
you would
if
really lose the bedroom number 5 if
No,
you
no.
did that, because it would only be 7 feet.
That's not the problem, is this front bedroom. If we brought it in 2 feet, these windows wouldn't be symmetrical with this, and it
No, I'm
would be,
talking about third floor.
that's hidden there, so if we lost it 2 feet up there, it's not the end of the world. But
Well,
it's
no,
more
that-
so,
That bedroom 5 is showing.
yeah, the bedroom wouldn't work, really.
Well, it's showing 9 feet 6. If you
Yes.
took 2 feet off it,
Yes.
you'd be 7 feet 6.
Then we would have to make it 1 bedroom then. Just get rid of the wall here and just reconfigure it as
That's
one.
That's
yeah.
why you stayed to the 3 feet setback
Exactly.
instead of going 5.
They needed the 2
Because
bedrooms.
the finished storage room in the back, that's set back. on
Yes,
the
and
third floor.
that's sloped down.
Okay.
So that's not full height, we're putting HVAC equipment in there and storage.
Okay.
And you're maintaining 5 off-street parking spaces, correct?
6.
6?
6.
We're,
2 and 1, 2 and 4.
well, mine's non-conforming, I got a double lot wide.
So
Five on a
So
plan.
definitely 2 in there.
There's 5 on the plan, but whatever. You only need 4.
Yeah, it's 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's 5 or 6, but it's certainly not 4. So again, this is a pretty tight street. They have more than enough off-street parking, which is the rarity in town as well. So,
Right.
And we do use our driveway.
Good.
Good.
I lost my mirrors on that street, parking there, both cars.
Well, he takes up my spots and then I have to park somewhere else.
So I think we're determined that the amendment to the plan, Mr. Patterson, is not to apply for a height variance, notwithstanding the fact that it's less than 10% of the overall height and still qualifies as a C. But we're going to amend to change the roof pitch on just a portion of the roof to 4 on 12, which will keep us at 30 or below. And as Mr. Collins said, it's only for a portion of that part of the roof, so we are not going to need a height variance.
Eric, one more question. So it's a substantial substantial improvement to the building, which means they have to meet the floodplain development permit, fair market value, which means they might be struck down by that.
I'm not sure it isn't, in fact, a substantial improvement based on the value of the property, which we can get an appraisal if necessary, but that's something that, to the extent it has to come before you, Mr. Galantino,
Right.
you will look at the overall market value of the house and then determine if the cost of construction exceeds 50% of that number.
But we're not giving you a variance for that part,
Not unless
the
you
50%
are,
rule.
the President of the United States is the only person who can that
Okay.
variance, because FEMA and the National Flood Improvement Program forbids that from happening.
So-
We know this board wouldn't do that, so.
I think what Jimmy's saying is be prepared to submit an appraisal
Right.
on.
We'll get that.
I believe on a previous submittal, we submitted the appraisal and everything, that we were under the 50%.
All right. So, thank you, Jim, for pointing that out, but
Just got to put it on the record.
of course, right, as the values go up, it's, all right. So I think, just to make sure that we're on the same page, Mr. Manos, it's what we're seeking tonight, plus roof pitch for just a portion. Mr. McLaurin, I think that was all of your comments, unless there was something we are missing here.
No, I think we're good.
Parking's good. Eve, we're not over on height. Jim pointed out about the base flood and the substantial improvement. Landscaping is certainly great on this one. 3 in a row, Mr. Giesecke. I thought we weren't going to hit that, but we did. So we would rest just on,
What's the placement of the third floor deck? I thought that was a variance, or that's not a variance?
It's not.
It's not, okay.
so Mr. Patterson, we
No,
would.
actually, they wrapped it around, and Piero and I talked about it's also a mechanical platform along the side there, and there's no access from the front, so it's not going to be used as a deck.
Okay.
It's a mechanical.
I just thought I
platform.
saw that on the report.
And I also do want to point out that the minimum lot size is 2,500 square feet, and they're almost at 5,000 square feet. It's a substantially large lot, very deep, not wide.
We would rest subject to, again, calling our witnesses as need be, but otherwise, I think we've established both potentially a hardship. I do agree with Mr. Richmond, but to the extent the board wants to call it hardship or flexible C, keeping the landscaping. We heard from the property owner and her neighbor that, this fits in about as well as we can make something fit in without tearing it down and starting from scratch, so we would rest.
Anything else from the board? Any questions? Anyone here from the public? Comments, questions? Please come up and state your name.
All right.
Go ahead.
Mr. Pitts, since it's a new application, just got to do the whole thing over again. Just name and address.
John Pitts, 413 North Huntington and Margate.
And Mr. Pitts, please raise your right hand. You swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, first of all, I got to tell you, I love the look of the house. That's awesome. But I'm a little bit curious on the floodplain issue. What's the sort of workflow? How does that get addressed and
So
resolved?
the way this works is, under the National Flood Improvement Program, a flood insurance policy that's issued through the CRS system through Margate Jimmy has to make sure as a floodplain manager, that a house can't be reconstructed over 50% of the assessed value or the appraised value of a house, not including the land. So to the extent a house is worth $1 million, the maximum amount they could spend on reconstruction would be $500,000. You couldn't go over that, you'd violate the substantial improvement. And as Jim pointed out, that's not a variance. The board can't give that variance, nobody can give that, only FEMA, and they won't do that.
But if they do that, you have to raise the house to the current level.
Right, I understand.
Right.
Yeah.
But if it's less than 50%, they don't have to do that.
Yes, but the board can go ahead tonight and grant the variances while they wait for that?
No, it's not.
No, when they submit the permits, we review it.
Okay, I got it.
It's
No,
subject.
we can't
Yeah,
do
all right,
that.
I got it. Thank you.
Good, thanks.
Anyone else?
All right. Mr. Winfelder, just your name and address again for the record.
8306 Atlantic Avenue.
And that's Tim Winfielder. Mr. Winfielder, do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, thanks.
Debbie and Marco used to be my son's neighbors, so I spent a lot of time over there. And the house itself is a very unique house, and it's a good feeling to see that it's not going to be torn down, and it looks like it's going to be a nice job. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Oh, sorry. Name and address, please.
David Goodelman, Goodelman. Address is 8 North Gladstone.
All right, Mr. Gittleman. Mr. Gittleman, please raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Okay, great. Thank you. Go ahead.
I find no issues. I'm very happy that it's not going to be a cookie cutter house, and it's definitely going to be an improvement to the neighborhood, and they have more than enough parking in that house. I wish every house had that much parking. And also, I haven't lived on that street for 25 years, but about 25 years ago, that street might have been widened about a foot on each side, so part of that 5-foot variance in the front, which I think you guys aren't making a variance, I want you to be aware of that. Because that street's not really supposed to have heavy trucks on it, and we get quite a few heavy trucks, and they get stuck and have to back out. So it's, and you did live there, yes, so you know.
And I got stuck there today behind a heavy truck unloading a dumpster. We had to sit there for 20 minutes waiting for the truck to move.
Okay, thank you very much.
Anyone else? Public portion's closed. Leo, would you read a motion, please?
Okay, it's another C variance application. Need a motion and a second for the following relief. A variance to the front, from the front yard setback to the porch and the deck, 7.58 feet is proposed. The requirement based on the prevailing is 8.97 feet. Front yard setback to the building, 5 feet proposed and 14.1 feet is required. 14.15 feet is required. Side yard setback to the building on the left side, 3 feet proposed, 5 feet required. They will not, the building height will comply, but instead the roof pitch is required to be 5 on 12, and they're requesting it 4 on 12, just for that portion to get the height down so it's compliant. And then there's the roof eave height variance as set forth in Mr. McCarn's report. The conditions, as Jimmy alluded to, it's going to be subject to the 50% rule. There's, I'll include a checklist waiver from the area map, and then the other conditions, again, the standard conditions, anything set forth in Mr. McLaren's report unless otherwise addressed. Any representations made by or on behalf of the applicant during the course of the hearing will be followed, and subject to any other potential outside approvals.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Tom Collins?
Well, I'll tell you, you must be a really good architect for doing what you did. And you must be a really good neighbor, because I see in the other picture, you're letting them use your electricity to run lights to their house. That's not bad.
I made sure the plug was on their side.
On their side, okay. Well, I'm
That's a
saying,
good eye,
all
Mr.
right.
Collins.
Wow.
All right.
Really smart.
You have to look hard when you're looking
Well,
at
you
plans.
certainly spend your time on that. I didn't see that. That's
Uh,
good.
Yeah, I know the aesthetics of the roof pitch, and we try to keep the roof pitches the same, but as Mr. Patterson said, I don't think in 10 years we'd give them one height variance. We just don't do that. We don't, FEMA's pushing us up higher and higher, and they're going higher again. And eventually, we're going to have to start raising our streets to meet sea level. You know, it's just something that's going to come, and we work here in a 50-year plan, not a what's this year or next year. So we consider a lot of things. I have had a lot of reservations, but after such excellent testimony, she did a better job than you.
Did a better job than me, too. Did great.
I think that you do meet the C1, the hardship variance, the street, the angle, just the sheer fact that you get Castle's traffic that's tough. And I also think that the way you've maintained the existing house and what you're going to do in terms of the improvements and maintaining the character actually embodies the C2 variance, so it is a substantial benefit to Margate, to the residents, and to yourselves. So I think when you consider all the factors, normally I wouldn't go this way, but I think in this one particular case, I think you did a great job, and I vote in favor.
Richard Patterson?
I also wanted to compliment you. I like to be a little more forgiving when you're dealing with a house. Most variances are pre-existing, so they don't do any harm to the neighborhood. But I understand when you're trying to improve an existing house, you have your starting point. You can't help that. And I think what you've done with it, and to keep it as modest as you have, and to have it look like that, I think you've done a great thing. I see no detriments. I see, again, a positive to the neighborhood here, and I approve.
Jim Galantino?
No, I appreciate people keeping their old houses. I just have to be the bad guy and tell you, you gotta elevate if you exceed the 50% rule, which is, if anybody has any questions, you can give me a call. I'd like to explain it to you in a little greater detail. Eric hit it kind of added a little bit, but there's more involvement with different parts of the map, how high we're trying to get to, what is our goal, and what's moving forward with Margate on the flood ordinance. Just that alone, it's a beautiful rendition. I think Mr. Giraldi did a great job. I think he established a lot of explanation to the release he needs for the variance, and I approve.
Margaret Gubernalty?
I agree with the other board members. It is a beautiful design to an existing house. I like the porches that wrap around on the side there. It is a large lot. What are we, 5,000 square foot lot, double the size of the S25. I think we're keeping the existing footprint, which I have no problem with, based upon the curve of the street and the location of the house. Thank you for bringing the height down, and good luck. I approve the application.
Craig Palmisano?
I always love to see a house rehabbed instead of torn down. And it's a nice, very nice design. Plenty of parking for off-street. So as there's a lot of positives. The only one negative I didn't care for was the left side of the house, but more positives than negatives on this. So, and you're long-term residents, been here forever, I approve.
Remy Pelosi?
Oh, yeah, Remy had to leave.
Oh,
You didn't
I'm
notice.
sorry.
It's all right.
Stephen Giesecke?
You have a yard. And that's important because a lot of people end up using their driveways as yards or patios. It's a nice design. And I like the idea of not having a bump out on the side, where you might have been able to do that. But, yeah, I think everything fits the requirements. I approve.
Andrew Campbell?
I approve.
Michael Richmond?
Yeah, I think it's a nice project, and I think it is, the lot, the way the lot is situated is a hardship, which is driving a few of the variances, and, you know, we did lower the height, and I'm going to approve it.
The application is approved with 8 in favor and 0 opposed.
We're going to take a break for a few minutes. We're back in session. Next case, where are we? Last case. Revolution Builders, Inc., 8607 Atlantic Avenue, 10 South Nassau, Block 115, Lot 14, located in the S60 zoning district, seeking C variance relief for Atlantic Avenue setback to house, Atlantic Avenue setback to porch, and possibly others in order to construct a new single-family home. Taxes and water payments are current, and proof of advertising and notifying have been satisfied. Mr. McLarnon?
Say goodnight to Pinky. Pinky left the board.
We don't have to say goodnight, she's right there. Oh, we have to put it on the record.
She's not
Right.
participating.
She has to recuse herself for a conflict of interest.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, my report is based on the application of Revolution Builders, Inc., 8607 Atlantic Avenue, Block 115, Lot 14, located in the S60 zoning district. FEMA zone elevation 9. So the minimum that the first floor can be is 12 to the bottom on the floor. Seeking C variance and planning and zoning report. Hardship variance because it's a corner lot, and also, believe it or not, the one house that they have to compare it to for the front yard setback creates the hardship. The background is as follows. The applicant is seeking relief from the ordinance of the City of Margate to construct a new flood-compliant home on a by right subdivided lot within the Parkway section of Margate City. The request is for a variance on a corner property for front yard setback relief on the Atlantic Avenue front for both porch and building. Due to the site occupying a corner, by definition, 2 front yards and 2 side yards exist. The setbacks rely on the setback of just 2 buildings, including the property in question. Page 2 of my report is the zoning chart, and again, I just want to point out that the minimum lot size is 6,000 square feet. The new corner lot after the subdivision will be 6,733 square feet. Minimum lot width is 50 feet. They far exceed that by 87.33 feet. And technically, there are 3 variances, but appropriately, after you hear my explanation, it's essentially 2 variances. Documents reviewed in Section 2, page 3. Section 3 of the variances required. And again, I did communicate with Michael Colchins, the architect, and Scott Becker, the developer, and Mr. Goldstein, and we were able to reduce a couple of variances and really mold this to how it fits the ordinance a lot better than what was previously shown. So the variances required as follows. Front yard setback to the porch and deck. Atlantic Avenue, whereas the minimum required setback based on the prevailing setback is 41 feet, 41.10 feet. 21.28 feet exists for the existing house, and 20 feet is proposed. Same thing with the front yard setback for the building, whereas the minimum required setback on the prevailing setback is 33.32 feet, 12.16 feet exists, and 11.42 feet is proposed. Actually, I have those reversed, don't I? Front yard setback for the fence, and again, the fence If they didn't have a fence on the plan and they got building permits, and then they came in tomorrow, the day after they got a building permit, and they asked for a fence permit, I would grant it without a variance. So, because the way the ordinance reads, once a house is built, the front yard setback begins at the face of the house. So because it's in the front yard setback based on the prevailing, and it's being applied at the same time, it's technically a variance. In my opinion, it should not be, but we will be fixing the front yard setbacks. Again, a waiver is a copy of an area map showing all properties within 200 feet. Front yard setbacks are based on or skewed due to the one adjacent house being set back much further from Atlantic Avenue due to the pool location and occupying a very extremely oversized lot. And only 2 properties are figured into the calculations, so I'm not going to elaborate anymore. That's the gist of this, the variance request. I do want to point out that the existing grade is about 6.4. Without a garage, a 6-foot-tall crawl space would be permitted. NJDEP would require an additional foot, which would be a 7-foot crawl space. So that is why we allow an additional foot to allow parking, which is permitted by FEMA. I just wanted to throw that out there to remind the board. And that concludes my report.
Raj, I got one question.
Yes.
So the third floor deck faces Nassau. Are they going to change the address?
Yes, it's already, yes. May I comment?
Yeah, go.
We spoke to Mr. Mangan. The actual address will be 10 South Nassau, which will be the new front of the house.
That was actually done during the subdivision approval, but for the sake of argument, it's still known as 8607 Atlantic Avenue.
May I
Go ahead.
proceed, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Okay. Once again, the 4th case in a row. This one has been kicking around for a very long time because of the pretty substantial pushback that the city has given my client with regard to the plans and the development scheme overall. As Roger pointed out, initially we came into the board on an informal basis with the staff committee that was a much different design than this, and Mr. McLarnon and people at the city didn't like that and made us go back and do a few changes. So what we have now is the product of a number of iterations. We believe this perhaps is the best one, but it certainly wasn't easy to get here. I do want to point out as well, for the board's sake, which I think is very important, we're talking about a new house, which, as Mr. Patterson likes to point out occasionally, you can build almost any new house without variances, but we do have a bit of a hardship legitimately because the house at 9 South Osborne, the owners of which are here, kind enough to stay through the meeting, is the only other house to compare it to. So when we talk about these corner lots, this one literally has one house which is set back pretty far. If the existing house that Mr. Colchin's designed met these setbacks, you would have what I call the boxcar effect. You'd have a skinny, not even long house. It would be a very odd-shaped house in the corner of the property. I think Mr. Colchin's has a layout of what would be built there and what the house footprint looks like, correct?
I think he showed the setbacks.
Right. We'll look at that.
I'd like to see that, yeah.
We'll look at that in a minute, but if we complied with that, because we're talking about setbacks of 30 feet to the porch, 40 to the building, that's awfully significant. But even with all of that, take note, please, Mr. Giuseppe, we're talking about a front yard landscaping of 70%, which is fairly rare in Margate because everybody wants to do the max out thing. Now, of course, the building coverage is at 30%. All the other coverages, landscape coverage, actually exceeds minimally. But your front yard landscaping, 70%, is the product of a lot of back and forth with the city to get that number up as high as possible. So we do believe we're going to be able to establish, either through the hardship or through the flexible C, the variances, as Roger pointed out. And again, we had the potential to just not show the fence on the plan and then come in, prospectively build a house, and then put the fence up, which would establish a new front yard. But that would have been disingenuous. We wanted to make sure that you had all the information. We know that one of you would have asked that question at some point, why aren't you doing it this way? And we'd have to go back to the drawing board. So we just put that on the plan already. But we do believe that that variance is kind of driven by the other variances we're seeking. If we get the other variances, that technically isn't a variance, but it's on the plan because Mike's a good architect and Roger wanted it on the plan. So having said all of that, can I ask Mike to take the microphone and get sworn in with Mr. Manos, and we can talk about the setbacks and the reason why we're here based upon what Roger points out as numbers 1 and 2. And if the board has questions about the fence, we'll certainly answer it. But we don't think that variance is something that we'd have a problem with if you do grant 1 and 2. If you don't, then it's a problem. But, we'll see where we go from here.
Okay.
So if we didn't grant the variance, then you would just wait to put the fence up till the house was built, correct?
Well, we wouldn't want to do that, but yes.
No, but I mean, that
Yes,
would be
that
the
would be
result.
the practical way of doing it, because
Right.
we would have established a front yard setback,
Okay.
and then none of the rest would
I just
matter.
wanted that clear.
No, the
Right.
board in the city has been particularly difficult lately, and we're just trying to comply and give you back the, detail on the plans that you want.
Okay.
So, having said that, Mike, Leo's going to swear you in, and then we'll talk about the project a bit.
Okay, Mr. Colchins, just your name and business address for the record, please.
Sure. Michael Colchins, 6021 3rd Street, Mays Landing, New Jersey.
And please raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Colchins, you're a licensed architect in the state of New Jersey, right? You've been before this board on numerous occasions.
Yes, I have.
Mr. Chairman, would you
We'll
mind if
accept
we...
his credentials, yes.
Thank you. All right, Mike, walk us through the plan, and the board wants to see the house. Pull that first page down. It's a very unique house. It's big, it's beautiful, it fits on the lot well, but we still need variances, so if you don't mind, just walk us through the general design and explain to the board with particularity what the house could be if we weren't able to obtain these variances, how it would be small and in the corner based upon the setback.
So, the house is fully compliant except for the setbacks on Atlantic Avenue. The only reason we're seeking relief for the setbacks is because the one house that we have to compare is so far back that the required setback is excessive. So I picked a setback that I thought was more generous than typical for.
Yeah, I would
Atlantic
just like to
Avenue.
see how bad it was.
Okay.
Do you have that?
I have these two lines, if you look at the plan, these are the required setbacks.
The two that come out the top?
If you look, it says 41.1
Yeah, okay.
average dwelling, 33.2 average porch, and there's lines. Those are the actual required setbacks.
And Mr. Patterson, what's interesting about this is, if you look at Mr. McLaren's chart, the former house, which is now torn down, the setbacks for Atlantic Avenue were almost what we're doing now. That what was there before was 12.16. We're asking for 11.42. The building was at 21.28. We're asking for 20. So this is kind of close to what was there previously, but the design of the house required a little less than a foot deviation for both the porch and the building on Atlantic. And then if you look at Nassau, what was there before was 7. We're at 10. 20 to the building on Nassau, we're at 18. So we're fairly close. But Mike, show us where we would be if we had to use the skewed averages based upon the house at 9 South Osborne.
Yeah, so again, the two setbacks, I didn't actually draw a floor plan of anything, but here's the two setbacks. And one thing I would point out also is that Atlantic Avenue is not at a right angle to Nassau. So the 20-foot setback is to the corner. It actually increases as you go past. So it's actually, the bulk of the Atlantic Avenue is a little bit more than 20-foot setback. It's probably closer to the 21-foot.
Well, be particular with regard to explaining to the board where, and show them as much as you can, where the house would be if the setbacks were complied with.
So this line right here is the actual dwelling, the required setback. So we would be restricted from this line to, I think this is the minimum side yard setback. So we would be restricted to this. We'd have a very squat house. The developer would lose a lot of buildable area. And the required setbacks are not consistent with anything else. It was just, that one particular lot.
Well, you're also in a showcase area along Atlantic Avenue with these houses. It would look kind of ridiculous to meet those
When we
requirements.
talk about a desirable visual environment, which is one of the standards in the municipal land use law, what the municipal land use law kind of guides you against are homes that don't look like they fit in. So something like this would be, again, that boxcar-ish type of house in the rear and the corner. It doesn't look like the streetscape along Atlantic Avenue, but it's still so far back. I mean, the minimums in Margate's ordinances are greatly exceeded by the chart that Roger put together. But of course, we do need variances because of that. If the house at 9 South Osborne was further out to the road, we probably wouldn't be here. But the way the calculations work, there's only one house to base that calculation from.
To illustrate that point, Eric, on the prior application, I think there's like 14 homes that were calculated in. You throw out the high, you throw out the low. You don't have that luxury here. You're stuck with whatever it is. Again, the neighboring property is causing the hardship.
And under the old, I don't know when that law was changed, the previous calculation, if you only had one house, you defaulted to 5. So here you're still so much further back. So in this case, the city gets the benefit of a pretty grand house along Atlantic Avenue. It is set back, to the house itself 20 feet, which is a considerable amount. And there's a nice sized porch, which is set back 11 feet from the road. So when you look at what this will look like as you drive down Atlantic Avenue both ways in, the house isn't markedly closer to Atlantic, it just is markedly closer than 9 South Osborne. One house skews that average. So this house will line up the way it should, but the house at 9 South Osborne is just back a little further. It's a lovely house too. I mean, it's
When you talk about the setbacks, I mean, it looks to me like for this house anyway, the property line extends, I don't know how far that is from the curb or the sidewalk, you know what I'm saying? So you're not like 11 and a half feet from Atlantic
Right.
Avenue, you're more like.
That's correct,
You're
Mr.
right.
Richmond.
It's
You're
a lot
right.
further to the street.
I don't
and
have a
also
scale, but.
11.42 is the minimum. It goes to 14.33.
Yeah,
No,
but
what Mike's
I'm-
saying is, the house itself, the setback, isn't from Atlantic. You have a distance from the inside property line back, which makes it look further back
Looks
from
like
Atlantic.
it's more, like from the curb line, it looks like it's more over 20 feet. I don't know
Well,
the
you've
scale.
also got another 5 feet of grass there, it looks like.
Yeah.
Out to the
Right.
sidewalk, yeah.
Right, it's a weird setback line.
No, but I think it's probably more setback than anything else in here.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, what they're ending
Yeah.
up with is a very generous setback.
Right.
Atlantic Avenue is 100 foot wide, so, yeah.
So, Mr. Colton, based upon your design and based upon the one house that you had to work from, do you see any negative that could be associated with pushing the porch to 11.42 and the building to 20 from the property line, as Mr. Richmond said?
No, I think it's consistent with the majority of the structure here.
And to the extent a negative could possibly be associated with it, would you say the benefits outweigh any negatives, maintaining a 20-foot setback to the house and 11.42 to the porch?
Yes, I agree with that.
So, Mr. Chairman, I know that you get a lot of applications, and a lot of times we're talking about setbacks based upon 8 or 9 houses, and sometimes we see the reports from Mr. McLarnon that say the more you move a house forward, the more you're going to skew the distances from the entire street. Here, you don't really have that problem because there's only one other house, which already exists. Now, I suppose if that house were torn down in the future, they'd then be bound by the dimensions we have here, but they're more in line with normal dimensions versus 40 feet to a building and 33 to a house. So in this case, I would submit that the skewing problem really isn't there because what we have here will remain for 30 or 40 years at least, and now what's built next door, if they ever decide to do something, will be in line with this house, which is in line with all the other homes, which under the municipal land use law is what we're trying to achieve by way of a desirable visual environment using creative architectural techniques. So having said all that, we would rest subject to further question, but I think we've proven potentially under the C1 or C2 standard that this will not have a negative impact. And then, of course, we're not getting into the details about the fence, but if the board sees fit to grant this, the fence kind of comes along with it. If you'd like us to talk about the fence, we can.
No, thank
But I
you.
think Roger was pretty clear in the report, so that's it.
I have one question, Eric. The mechanical room on the ground floor, can we make sure that's the finished first floor is mechanical equipment?
We will do that.
Thank you.
And I also said this was part of a subdivision. I was incorrect. I was thinking of another identical corner.
No.
So there was not a subdivision?
No. But he's still petitioning to have the address moved to the side street.
And we've gotten approval from the assessor already on that, so it will be 10 South Nassau, just for the record.
If there's nothing further from the board, is there anyone from the public that would have questions, or, come on up, come on down. Yeah, very good, and unfortunately, you gotta be sworn in again.
Yeah.
John Pitts, correct?
Yeah.
For
We're
something,
13 North
for
Huntington.
13 North Huntington.
Yep.
Mr. Pitts, please raise your right hand. Do you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, I understand the setback and the issues with the one home. However, this home's in the S60 zone, the Parkway section, and how it looks and fits in with the Parkway section, I think is subjective. I have to say, for me, it does not, especially the Atlantic Avenue elevation.
In what way?
It just doesn't fit sort of the classic manor homes of the Parkway section in the S60 zone. So while I applaud the home, and I don't think there's any issues with the setback, I don't think it fits in the S60 section.
Do you realize we have no say over it?
I understand.
Okay,
but
as
I
long as
gotta
you realize that.
voice my opinion, right?
Look, I feel that way about a lot of them here, but we have no power to tell them to make it a nice-looking home.
Understood, but we
Yeah.
could use
Well, I
the
don't think
power.
it's not a nice-looking home.
We could use the power of the holding up the variance in this case. But
That would be
I
easy.
understand. It's not, but I'm sorry, needed to voice my opinion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
The greatest thing, Americans, the right to redress government. So, Mr. Pitts, thank you. We always like when the public comes out and certainly has an opinion, and that's
Could you
great.
speed it up, please? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Another with the public. My apologies.
Hey, Andre, just name and address for the record.
Andre Santori, 9 South Osborne Avenue.
All right, please raise your right hand. Mr. Santori, you swear affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth?
I do.
Thanks.
I have no problem with the setbacks. Just what's the height of the home?
It's 30, the peak of the roof is 30 foot above the first floor elevation.
What's the first floor elevation?
It's the allowed 8-foot
I-
garage.
Yeah, he wants to know.
I just want to know how high, I
8.5
mean,
feet, looks like the garage.
well, what's the flood, what's the,
It's a 9 zone. Really doesn't fall out.
I normally include the floodplain
Yeah,
elevation.
it's not on
I
there.
forgot it on this one.
I just see, all I see is.
Actually, comment number 9 in my report.
I'm sorry?
The existing grade is 6.4.
Well, what's the required?
The required height is 30 foot above the first floor, and that's where we're at. The first floor is, they give you an 8-foot garage
Okay.
before you get to the first floor.
Because there's no garage, you get an extra foot?
It's 16.2 to the finished first floor.
From sea level?
Yeah.
From sea level?
Yes.
But I think what he's asking is from the
What does it
dirt.
have, what's the requirement though? Is it 15, 14 from sea level?
I think we gave them 1 foot because, so they could have parking underneath and
No.
storage, but other than that, it's, FEMA has a requirement and
What
DP
FEMA?
adds on top.
It's a, yeah, it's a 9 zone.
It's 14, all right.
13.
Listen, I'm, you know.
Hey, Andre, how you doing, buddy?
Based on FEMA, this would be 7, but they give you an extra foot to get. 8 foot of
All right.
garage space.
No, I just
for-
watched,
for
like,
compliance.
I'm just see a bunch of 40-foot homes built around me.
So your
Recently.
curb is at 6.4 feet above sea level.
Thank
per
you.
the
6.4 feet.
Per Roger's report.
Okay.
So that's from the dirt.
See, I listened to you said it
Right.
was under number 9.
Did you ever know anybody on the planning board? It's a
Zoning
pleasure.
board, yeah,
It's a
2 people, yeah.
pleasure to have you.
I sat for so many years next to your father.
Yeah, he loved
And-
coming here.
Oh.
Yeah.
He taught me so
Plus
much.
he came into the store all the
He looked forward to it. He would drive around with Ned and go look at all the.
Well, I'll tell you something, though. When I first started, he drove me around. It scared me to death. He was.
Oh, He's scared. Oh, him driving.
Him driving, yes, yes. Oh, no, not the board.
No, yeah, he took the car door out once. We ended that.
He told me when they put the lights on Atlantic Avenue, when they made them all the same, instead of staggering them, I have to go 62 to make it from Longport to my house and not have to stop at a light.
As a kid, he would drive through the lights and say, that light shouldn't be there anyway. So, thank you very much.
He was such a pleasure to
Thank
work
you.
with.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Public portion is closed. Anything else on the board? Would read that motion, please?
All right, C variance application, there's, for the front yard setbacks, the specific variants are the following. So front yard setback to the building along Atlantic, the requirement based on the home at the corner of Osborne is 41.10 feet, and 20 feet is proposed to the building, and to the porch and the deck. Based on the home on Osborne, it's 33.32 feet, and 11.42 feet is proposed. And then we had the discussion about the fence. The fence is going to equal the building at 21.28 feet. So those are the variances. There's the area map, checklist waiver, showing all property owners within 200 feet, which is pretty standard. The conditions are the applicant will comply with any representations made during the course of the hearing, subject to any other necessary outside approvals, and then any conditions in Mr. McLaren's report. Jimmy, you made reference to something about?
Mechanical equipment has to be at finished first floor.
Right, which is a requirement, correct?
Right.
Okay, so the mechanical equipment will be elevated, and stay away from the mean people at 11 South Nassau Avenue.
I'll make a motion.
You can take care of those for me.
Okay.
Mike or Tom?
I'll second it.
Tom Collins,
You know, this is the first time, including with sitting with audio, that I've ever had a magnificent home with a magnificent front yard be characterized as a hardship for another property. I'll tell you what, I admire what your questions were. I admire your property. I mean, you do your father right. I can say that. As far as this property goes, it's a single lot. It's got so many hardships because, again, like I said earlier, it's on a corner. And corner properties generate all the variances and hardships. I think in regard to the style of the house, I think this is what we're going to be seeing in the parkway. This is a new parkway, and we're not going to change that. And I have no intention of even trying to, because I think he designed a beautiful house. I wish I could have a house like that, but I don't want the steps. I think it meets the C1 in terms of the hardship with the setbacks and the corner property, and I think what you've done to minimize that is really an attribute to your design. I also think it meets C2 because it's really going to be a showpiece, and I think it's going to make the neighbor's property worth even more money too as we go along. So it's a good thing for Margate. It's good to see new homes coming up and not having blight, and I think it's good. So I vote in favor.
Richard Patterson.
I agree with Tom. I vote in favor.
Jim Galantino.
You know what happened to the character of Margate? FEMA.
Exactly.
And that's all I have to say. I vote in favor.
Craig Palmisano.
Another black and white. I approve.
Stephen Giesecke.
I see this as a technical issue, but it's, if the other house wasn't there, they wouldn't even be here.
No.
So, yeah, it's,
70% landscaping, Mr. Giesecke.
you know, see those trees over there? Don't they look nice?
They look beautiful.
It could be 75% though.
We're working on, we're one thing at a time, but this is good.
Imported from the Poconos.
Yeah.
Andrew Campbell.
I agree with the rest of the board. I think it's a really nice piece of work, and the public opinion is always nice to hear as well. I agree. I vote yes.
And Michael Richmond.
Roger, are we talking about doing something about this whole prevailing setback
Yes.
thing? Yeah, because this is a perfect case of that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's totally
There's no
ridiculous.
doubt, I can't stand it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, whatever. So, yeah, I think there's few hardships for this property, and I'm gonna vote yes.
The application is approved with 7 in favor and 0 opposed.
Motion to close the meeting?
Anyone for the public have any matters to bring up? We hear a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
All in favor?
Aye. Oh, you gonna get it?